Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the second part of What If Eri Sent Izuku Back in Time? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Or the future is determined. A few days after returning from I-Island, Hagakure texted the rest of 1A to suggest that they all meet up at a mall near UA to go shopping for any last-minute items. However, unlike Izuku's first life, everyone was going. Since Shoto lived at the dorms and his mom had been transferred, he would easily be able to both visit her and go on the shopping trip. Kaken on the other hand had grown to at least tolerate most of the class, and he just couldn't say no to Kirishima at all any longer, so he was also joining them. Once the time had been set, Izuku sent a text to Momo and Kaken asking them to prepare meals for the day they left for the camp. Kriati, why would we need to do that? Ground Zero. Because Aizawa-sensei is the sadistic type to have us start training before we even get to the camp. Why else? I'm betting that he will get us close and then drop us off, expecting us to get there on our own while dealing with obstacles that he set up beforehand. Valiant. Kaken has a point, Momo. He did lie to us about the logical ruse on our first day. Aizawa-sensei has a history of expelling entire classes on a whim. Besides, isn't it better to be safe than sorry? Considering how hard he's been pushing us, I think he's trying to get us licensed this year. A third year I know says that no one has gone through what we have since All Might made his debut, and back then, students were licensed as quickly as possible to deal with the number of villains that were roaming about. Kriati, I'll get to work right away. Bakugu, let me know who you'll cover and I'll do the rest. Izuku smiled before changing into his workout clothes to meet with Toshi-sensei the next morning. Just as he opened the door though, he was stopped. Izuku, we need to talk, Kaken stated. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Kaken only called him by his proper name when it was serious, and he looked more serious than Izuku had seen since his revelation at the end of the sports festival. Toshi-sensei would have to wait. Once at the Kiyoshi Ward Mall, 1A actually stuck together while getting things they all needed before splitting up for more personal items. Before they split up though, they were once again recognized, some from the sports festival, others from their more recent activities. Hey, which of you are actually members of the Overcomers? One of them asked. 3 of you were at Hosu, then an extra 7 at I-Island, so how many of you are members? Fortunately, they had actually discussed it after the newspapers reported on their presence, so Izuku had a definitive answer. We're all Overcomers, the entirety of 1A. I'd intended to only form the group after we'd graduated but, well, circumstances forced our hands. So, the group was planned? What's the intent? Another asked. Although we would operate as individual heroes, should the need arise, we would team up to defeat any threat that comes our way. Any hero would be welcome to join or leave as they saw fit so long as the group remained, Izuku explained. As for our intent, it's nothing less than to replace All Might as the symbol of peace. The entire crowd was utterly shocked at the answer, even more so than his classmates had been. The silence was only broken when one person spoke up, saying replace the symbol of peace? That's a lofty goal. Do you mind if we talk about that? Izuku immediately recognized the voice as Shimura Tenko. Of course, we can. He turned to his classmates and told them, go on without me, I'll only be a few minutes. Most of them did so, but Shoto and Kaken had recognized the name. Are you sure you'll be all right, Izuku? Shoto asked. I could let Toshinori-sensei know if you want. I can't believe I'm agreeing with Icy Hot, but he has a point. The last time you two met, you hurt your leg, Kaken agreed. Kirishima, who had stayed with Kaken, raised his eyebrows in alarm, as he immediately figured out who Shimura actually was. As had happened too many times before, his courage failed him and he ran away, though as soon as he stopped, he pulled out his phone and dialed Toshinori-sensei. Izuku, Shoto and Shigaraki stared after the redhead while Kaken chased after him. Izuku? Shoto asked, reminding his friend about the question. Izuku just gave a brilliant smile that, honestly, did nothing to ease his mind, but it did tell him that Izuku was confident he had things under control. Alright, he'd trust Izuku, but that didn't mean he'd trust the villain. He nodded to Izuku, walked by Shigaraki and then stopped right by his ear. "If you hurt him in any way," he whispered, "physically, mentally, hell, even emotionally, I will hunt you down and turn you into ash in the most excruciating manner possible, understand?" The villain paled and quickly nodded his assent. As Shoto walked away, Shigaraki stared at him. Well now, maybe Dabi had a point about the kid having potential. Between his threat here and his actions at the USJ that Sensei's spy had mentioned, it was clear that the split teen had a side that was comfortable with at least some moral ambiguity. An interesting friend you have there. But that's not why I'm here. He led the two of them to a nearby table, and only then did he start talking again. When it comes right down to it, I hate basically everything and everyone. But right now, what grinds my gears the most is the hero killer. Everyone's gone obsessed with him. My attack on the USJ and the Nomus I unleashed in Hosu were all overshadowed by that bastard. No one's even given me a second thought. But he can grandstand all he wants. All he really did was destroy what he hated. What's the difference between us? Izuku stared at Tenko in shock. Last time, he'd been too focused on staying alive to really answer. But now, you really don't get it, do you? He asked. No, I don't. What am I missing? Shimura asked. He was honestly surprised that the hero was so willing to be civil about this, let alone helpful. The message is the difference. What do you actually want? To kill All Might? That's nothing new or impressive, and what happens after you kill him? Stain, though, he had a goal and he was working towards that goal. He didn't destroy things just because he hated them, but in order to achieve his goal. All Might, no matter what you think of him, had his own goal and he achieved it. Even your master has a goal and the power to at least attempt it. Until you have your own goal, one that you're willing to risk your life for, you will never have the following that others do. That's it? You sound like the hero killer yourself, Shigaraki complained. But he actually decided to think about what the young hero had said. He had actually had a point. What did he want after All Might died? Then his thoughts turned towards all the sheep around them and their happy smiles, like nothing could hurt them. Yes, that was it. He wouldn't just kill All Might, he'd destroy this piece that he'd created and remind everyone just how cruel the world really is. Yes, he would accept his fate as the greatest destroyer the world had ever known. Once he finished with Japan, he would move on and revel in the chaos and destruction he would create throughout the entire world. Sensei wanted to rule the world? Well, let him, he wouldn't settle for such a normal dream. Izuku stared at the villain. He had started worrying the moment Shimura had started introspecting, but his worry had shot up when he started laughing. At first it had been quiet, but now it was approaching almost stereotypical. Villain laughter, and that could be dangerous given the circumstances. As Shigaraki got up to leave, Izuku stopped him. Wait, before you go, I have a question of my own. Let me guess, what's Sensei after? Who knows, really? I don't particularly care myself. As long as he helps me with my goal. I don't need to know what All for One is after, Izuku stated. Tamura turned to him in shock before Izuku continued. What I want to know is why do you want to kill All Might? Do you have a personal grudge against him, or is it just because of All for One? If anything, the question had shocked the villain even more than his lack of interest in his master. No one had ever asked him that before. After a few minutes of thinking, he finally answered the young hero. It starts with when my quirk awakened. I'm sure you can imagine what happened that day. I can disintegrate things by touching them, and I killed my entire family, admittedly some of them on purpose. Afterwards, no one, not one single person, hero or otherwise helped me, none except for Sensei. All Might, the symbol of peace and all the heroes that he inspired completely ignored me. Then he nearly killed the only real father I've ever had. I have plenty of reasons to hate All Might. With that, Shigaraki Tamura disappeared into the crowd. The police arrived 5 minutes later, by which time the villain was long gone. 2 hours and a debriefing later, Izuku walked out of the police station only to be ambushed by his mom. Izuku, baby, I can't do this anymore. My heart can't take any more scares like this. Hehe, Stain Island and now this? I can't support you any longer if you're going to keep risking your life like this. Izuku just shook his head. Mom, pro heroes are always risking their lives. That's one of the key things that make them heroes. The fact that they are willing to risk their lives to save others. How could I call myself even a future hero if I wasn't willing to do the same? To Izuku's surprise, his mother actually got mad at that. It's those troublesome boys that you hang around with that put those ideas in your head. Izuku, give up these dreams as well as your friendships with that Ida boy, that Todoroki and that Yaoyorozu, or you can find someplace else to live. Toshinori was quick to demand to know what she had against 3 of his best students. That Ida boy was directly responsible for my Izuku facing the hero killer. I can tell that girl is Midnight's daughter. I can only imagine how she's corrupting him. And what isn't wrong with the Todorokis? The father was arrested and the mother was put in an insane asylum. I will not have my boy associated with them. Izuku just sighed. If that's the way it has to be, Mom, then so be it. Toshinori's heart shattered at the answer, while Inko was pleased, until he spoke again. Do you want me to be gone tonight, or can I come by tomorrow to pick everything up? Izuku, what are you saying? I told you years ago that I was going to be a hero and that nothing was going to stop me, remember? Not even the idea that I was quirkless was going to stop me. And now you want me to cut ties from 3 of the best people that I know? I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't. No, I won't do it, no matter what you say. If you won't support me, then I'll move into the dorms. Inko paled in shock, but her resolve didn't waver. Fine. If you want to associate with such disreputable people, do so. If anything of yours is left behind tomorrow, I'm getting rid of it. And you're sleeping at UA tonight. With that, she stormed off and was taken back home by Sansa, who was quick to notice that his charge was crying the entire way home. Back at the station, Toshinori turned to his disciple, who immediately hugged him and started crying into his shoulder. All he could do now was offer him whatever comfort he could by hugging him back. Did I do the right thing, Sensei? Izuku asked when his tears became manageable. The right thing? Toshinori asked. Can it ever be right to turn on your parents so fully because they worry about you? I don't know. But I do believe that it was the only thing that you could do under the circumstances. With what comfort he could derive from that, Izuku hugged his mentor again and the two took a car to the Midoriya's apartment to grab an overnight bag and Izuku's toiletries with plans to return the next day for the rest of his possessions. Due to the large amount of stress he'd been through in the day, Izuku was quick to fall asleep on the drive to Heights Alliance. Toshinori decided that the best thing to do was to just let Izuku sleep, even after they arrived. When he carried his successor into the dorm, young Yaoyorozu was the first to notice. Izuku, Yagi-sensei, did something happen to him? And why did you bring him here? He's just had a bad day, that's all. After she heard about what happened with Shigaraki, his mother gave him an ultimatum that he had to refuse. So he's moving into the dorms, he responded as he set his student on a couch in the commons. Young Todoroki, who had been studying with his classmate, was quick to ask about the ultimatum, and both teens were horrified by what Toshinori told them. I don't know what I'd do if Izuku left UA, Shoto said. I know, he's basically become our guiding light, Momo agreed. Izuku is the one that best embodies what it means to actually be a hero. She turned to Toshinori and asked, you know what I mean, right? You've at least heard about our exercises? Toshi just laughed at that. Oh, I've heard all right. First in and last out, no matter how much Aizawa chastises him for it. Trust me, that's just how he is, always has been. The first day I met him, he rushed into a situation that had pros hesitating just to save one person's life. That sounds like him, Shoto agreed with a smile, thinking about the sports festival. He's so strong that he's willing to do anything he can to help everyone else. And now it's our turn to help him, Momo said. We'll stay with him tonight and then help him move out tomorrow. Shoto smiled back in response before joining his friend on the couch. Momo did the same, sitting down on Izuku's other side and creating a blanket. Toshinori smiled, knowing that Izuku was in good hands. Unbeknownst to those on the ground floor, Uraraka had overheard everything and was already making plans to join them. Toshinori turned to leave, only to be stopped by Momo. Wait, sir. Both you and Izuku have implied that you teach here, and even taught us before, but I don't recognize you. Will you explain that? Toshinori laughed at her question before answering. You'll know shortly after the training camp, young Yaoyorozu, I promise. That is, assuming that the league still attacks them. But then, Izuku has yet to be wrong about the future. Izuku was moved into the dorm right next to Shoto in order to help provide some level of comfort after being forced to move into the dorms. Exactly 4 days after that, 1A was reunited in order to head out to the training camp. Kendo and most of B were also excited, especially Tetsu, who was looking forward to working with Kirishima again. Of course, Monoma had to kill the good mood by mentioning a rumor that someone from A had failed. Must have been someone from 2 or 3 then, Izuku said. We all passed the finals. Monoma paled at that for a moment, causing Izuku to turn to Kendo. What's wrong with him? Oh, he failed the practical part of the final, and only barely passed the written. Didn't help that he refused to ask for any tutoring and turned down our offers, Kendo explained. I'm honestly starting to get worried about him, and Vlad-sensei isn't helping at all. Izuku stared at his B counterpart in shock. How did he fail against the robots? Kendo was about to answer when Kaminari started laughing. Seriously? One of you failed fighting robots? I'd hate to see how you would have done with our practical. What's that supposed to mean? Kuwaro Shirhai demanded. It means that we fought the teachers, you dumbass, Bakugo answered. And, how many of you passed? Tetsu asked. Kirishima slung his arm around his friend with a smile. Come on man, we're all here, aren't we? Aizawa-sensei said if any of us failed, we wouldn't even be going on this trip. Monoma immediately started whimpering at that, while the rest of B stared in shock. How could they have defeated pros like their teachers? Momo was quick to notice and explain. It's actually thanks to Izuku that we were all able to pass. He was brilliant enough to realize that the robots wouldn't be a challenge for us and that the teachers would face us. He even managed to figure out exactly who would face us and why, she finished, though she shared a secret glance with a few of her classmates. Kaminari of all people had been the first to bring it up, and things had just kept adding up since then. Their class rep had secrets, and they were worried, both about him and themselves. Those worries became even stronger when Izuku had them board the bus and took their phones from them, handing them over to Aizawa-sensei to hold for the entirety of the camp. And why did he insist on everyone using the restroom before they left? Interestingly, Izuku gave Aoyama a bottle of ginger ale before taking the back seat with Todoroki. The two of them were so comfortable with each other that she smiled, knowing that she would eventually be winning some money thanks to them. To pass the time, she started a conversation with Kyoka, who was quickly becoming one of her best friends. A few hours later, Momo had yet another piece of evidence in their favor when Aizawa-sensei stopped the bus, and Izuku simply smiled when he spotted the other car on the side of the road. Then, to her surprise, immediately after gushing about their trainers, the wild pussycats, he immediately went to introduce himself to the kid that was with them. Unfortunately, that turned out to be a bad idea, as the kid punched Izuku right where it hurt boys the most. I suppose I should explain that, Mandalay said as Shoto rushed to Izuku's side. While Shoto brought Izuku some relief with a cold hand, Mandalay told them, Koda here is a cousin of mine. His parents were pros who were murdered 2 years ago, so he doesn't have a very appreciative view of heroes. Pixie Bob picked up from there. So if you're smart, you'll let him be. Especially since you have work to do. Work? Mineta whimpered. The summer camp is at the base of the mountain way out there, Pixie Bob said, pointing in the general area. Everyone started getting a bad feeling about that, while Momo calmly walked to the luggage area of the bus and grabbed the 2 bags that she and Bakugo had prepared at Izuku's insistence. This was just a little too convenient, even considering the fact that everyone in A knew about Aizawa-sensei's sadistic side. It is currently 9:30 in the morning. If you're fast, you might get there by lunch. The grin on the pussycats' faces was positively predatory, and Momo braced herself as they were sent into the forest, Aizawa-sensei announcing that the training camp had begun. 3 hours into the forest, Izuku called for a break. Okay everyone, we're making some good progress, but we're still a long way from camp. Fortunately, I planned for Aizawa's sadistic side. Kaken, pick your group to eat, the rest of us will cover for you. No way, Dad. We're going to keep fighting and you can eat. Kirishima, raccoon eyes, soy sauce, glasses, bird, perv, Frenchie, arms and big lips, you're with me. With that, Momo broke into the bags and pulled out the meals for the remaining students. Oh, and one more thing, Dick. Keep track of how many beasts you take down. I want to know which of our groups is better. Pixie Bob froze in shock for a moment. When Aizawa asked what was wrong, she said, your students just dared to split into 2 groups so that one of them could have lunch. I'm not sure if I'm furious or impressed. Can I have one of them? Aizawa just glared at her in response. As they ate, Izuku smiled at his classmates. They had all become much closer than they were the first time around, helped by the fact that Momo and Shoto were more sociable and Kaken wasn't constantly threatening them. And UA wasn't being maligned by the press at all, so the fallout from the camp should be much better, even with Kaken's plan. The only question was when the league would show up, considering the precautions that they had taken this time. Izuku really didn't want to doubt his classmates, but it was better safe than sorry. He was just about to take another bite of katsudon when he remembered something he needed to take care of. Turning to Momo, he asked, do you think you could make something if you had the plans for it and list of materials? Let me see what you have, Momo replied. Izuku handed her the plans, allowing her to look over them. These are some intricate plans, Oh, they're by Melissa Shield, no wonder. Then she smirked at Izuku and asked, so, we should expect a gas attack at camp? Should I make enough for everyone in A and B? That's a great idea, Izuku answered, too focused on enjoying his lunch to truly pay attention. I don't think the league will attack before our 3rd day, but better to be prepared, what? He asked, having finally noticed everyone looking at him. You don't realize what you said, do you? Momo asked, so, when are you going to trust us with your secrets, Izuku? Izuku just barely managed to keep from reacting to that. What are you talking about, Momo? I trust you guys completely, and I don't have any secrets. That was one of the few out-and-out lies he had told since his return. Oh yeah, then how long has All Might been training you? Hagakure asked. That did cause him to panic. What are you talking about? All Might's not training me. Well, I mean he's not training me any more than he does you guys. Ojiro grinned at him. Come on Midoriya, you're not fooling anyone. How many times has he pulled you aside after class? We know he's training you, we just don't know why or in what. Yeah, come on man, Kaminari spoke up. I noticed something was up back at the USJ. You knew what was going on as soon as 13 finished her speech. You certainly sounded scared, but you were definitely more determined than anything else. Just spill already. Not to mention the fact that you clearly talked about the future just now, Jiro added. Is the league going to attack us or not? Izuku opened and closed his mouth, utterly shocked at the question and unsure of how to answer. Fortunately, Shoto recognized how his friend was feeling and decided to break the tension. Nor have you admitted that you're All Might's secret love child? Shoto! Izuku groaned, slapping his face. Their classmates turned to stare at Shoto before bursting out laughing. How many times do I have to tell you, it's not like that, you blasted conspiracy theorist? How many times has Todoroki asked that? Uraraka asked. At least once a week since the sports festival, Izuku groaned. Why am I even friends with you? He asked. As I recall, I said that I wasn't here to make friends, Shoto answered with a smile. But you insisted on tearing down my walls and declared us friends. And you know something, Izuku? I don't regret a single second of it. Izuku gave a huge grin at that, one almost reminiscent of All Might to Shoto's eye, while certain members of the group quietly grumbled. Things like that made them worry about their finances. Oh, and Uraraka, I was only really serious about my question the first 2 times. Every other time I've asked was when Izuku started getting stressed about something. It always distracts him. Shoto. His friend just smiled at him, and Izuku shook his head. Turning back to the others, he gave them an answer. I wish I could tell you, but right now it's too dangerous. After the camp though, I will explain everything. Finally, at about 6 in the evening, 1A arrived triumphantly at the Pussycats' base. They may have been tired, but they were standing tall and triumphant. Pixie Bob was extremely excited to see them arrive and pounced on them as soon as they entered the clearing. So, which one of you came up with the idea of stopping and actually eating in the beast's forest? Ida was quick to promote Midoriya's foresight, analysis, and planning, which only made Aizawa more suspicious of his problem child. All Might kept claiming that he was an analytical genius, but this seemed to be pushing it. However, he lost his train of thought as said problem child kicked Pixie Bob so hard she flew what looked like twice the height of the trees before she fell back to the ground in a daze and a crater. I like it. Will you please be my mate? No. 1,000 times, and why would I want to shudder, mate with someone who's twice as old as me? Pixie Bob rushed to him and stated, I'm pretty sure your math's off. I'm 18 at heart. That just caused Midoriya to launch her again. Ugh, this is going to be a long week, Aizawa thought with a groan before giving his students their instructions for the evening. As much as he had hated to, Izuku had not changed Mineta's attempt to see the girls while they were bathing. First, it provided another reason for the little perv to be expelled, something that the entire class was hoping for by this point, and both Izuku and Momo were keeping records of those reasons. Second, Koda's reaction was truly just perfect, and third, Izuku wouldn't be surprised if him saving Koda had been the first step to breaking through Koda's own walls. Besides, he had given up on trying to curb Mineta's perviness months ago, and as a result, him and Momo were working on another plan to deal with him. Fortunately, that was last night. Today, all 40 of them had been training with their quirks, something that Izuku had already had his classmates doing since the announcement about the sports festival. As such, A was treated to a rare sight. A surprised Aizawa when he read Kaken's throwing distance had improved by over 100 meters. Kirishima had figured out Unbreakable and was working to boost its durability and how long he could make it last. Shoto's power over his fire was greatly improved due to Endeavor's changed outlook and relatively public training, so he focused on learning to use both sides at the same time. Kaminari had boosted his safe power output to 3 million volts. Uraraka had raised the amount of weight she could lift as well as her endurance. Ashido had strengthened her acid, Dark Shadow had grown stronger through constant use during the day, and Ida was faster and his engines could endure greater stress. Now though, the Pussycats were putting them through far more intensive training than Izuku or Toshi-sensei could provide outside of UA. The Pussycats had all been impressed, with Tiger even saying that he'd never seen such a skilled and powerful group of first years before. Even so, by the end of the first day, A was still completely exhausted. Fortunately for them, they didn't have to suffer with the truly horrid curry that Izuku had the first time around. He'd quickly identified the best cooks in the class and put them in charge of actually making the curry while the others merely prepared the ingredients. As a result, even those like Kirishima and Siro who preferred to just stuff their mouths took the time to enjoy every bite. All except Koda, that is. As before, Izuku had to follow him to his little hideaway cave, and as before, he blew up at Izuku's arrival. Rather than be interested in the mere existence of the hideout though, Izuku started up the conversation he wanted to. It's not fair, is it? If it were, your parents would still be here. But you'd be surprised at how good you still have it? What would you know? Koda demanded. Izuku smiled before answering. There's this little girl I know. She's about your age. When her quirk manifested, she accidentally killed her father, causing her mother to abandon her. Her grandfather cared about her, but due to his position, handed her to his protégé, who then tortured her to understand her quirk. Because of that, I've never once seen her smile because she just doesn't understand what happiness is. I've been visiting her, trying to help her, but nothing's worked so far. You though, you have a cousin who clearly cares about you taking care of you. Do you really have things so bad when compared to someone else? Shut up. If my parents hadn't been so busy showing off, they'd still be here. Are you sure about that? Izuku asked. What's that supposed to mean? Koda demanded. What's the most popular game that kids play? Heroes and villains, of course. Stupid game, stupid names, he grumbled. And do you know what one of the most popular games was before quirks? Why would I know something stupid like that? It was Cops and Robbers, Izuku said. Koda looked at him in utter confusion. What did that have to do with anything? Some people are going to commit crimes with or without having quirks, and some people are going to do their best to either save others or catch the criminals with or without quirks. From what I remember about your parents, I think they would have been firefighters or police officers if quirks never existed. And the sad truth is that those jobs have always been and always will be dangerous ones that not everyone goes home from. A psychopath like Muscular, someone who is sick enough to enjoy killing, he's definitely one that would have been a killer without a quirk, and your parents were very brave to even try to stand up to him. And that's what really makes someone a hero, you know. A true hero is someone who sees a challenge, then chooses to stand up and face it, even knowing that they might fail and that it's not their problem to solve. That didn't work as well as he had hoped, as Kota picked up a stone and threw it at his head. "Get lost," he shouted, before throwing another stone. Izuku did as the boy asked, praying that his words would get through to him anyways. If not, then he'd still take down Muscular, no matter the cost. It had been worth it just to save Kota before, and he knew it would still be worth it this time. The next morning, when Pixie Bob announced the test of courage, Izuku spoke up and asked her to make certain that there was no one else around. His question immediately made certain members of a look up in fear. Was the League of Villains nearby? Was the attack that Izuku expected coming tonight? Fortunately, Ragdoll was quick to announce that there was no one around who shouldn't be around, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. That night, Ragdoll double-checked the area, and upon relieving everyone's fears again, the Pussycats announced the rules and the two classes were divided into teams, with Kowaro Shirhai being the member of B left on his own. Since he could merge with shadows, he didn't mind one bit. Also, with all of A having passed the exam, Izuku had a partner this time in the form of Kirishima. However, that didn't last long as Kaken was quick to demand that they switch partners. As the blonde had ended up with Shoto again, everyone was happy to make the switch, outside of the Pussycats, that is. By the time the first round ended, Tokage Setsuna and Yanagi Reiko had won the contest via body horror and Yanagi making things move that shouldn't be moving. For the second round, Izuku and Shoto had come up with the most dastardly plan to win that they could think of, and to pull it off, they asked Momo for a little help. Kendo Itsuka grinned as she walked down the path for the test of courage. Between her cool head and Tetsu's desire to be manly, there was no way they could fail to beat A. As they passed the halfway point though, they were surprised to encounter fog. "Wait, what's going on, Kendo? There shouldn't be fog tonight, right?" "No, the weather's too warm for that. Something weird is going on here." Her odd feeling only grew stronger when she heard the screams of Kaibara-sen and Komori Kinoko ahead, and a whispered leave. A few minutes later, when they had moved even deeper into the ever-thickening fog, Shisada Juroda and Kamkiri Taguru also started screaming, while the whispering voice had changed to leave this place. "Kendo, I think we should listen to the voice," Tetsu said. To Itsuka's shock, he was very nearly whimpering when he said that. "What's wrong, Tetsu? Don't tell me you're afraid of a little ghost story?" When Tetsu started shivering in response, she knew that yes, he was afraid of ghost stories. Well, she could use that. "Come on, don't you want to impress Kirishima? You're facing one of your true fears in this. Can he say the same?" As planned, that perked him up immediately. "No, he can't. Let's go. Leave this place or you will be damned." The fog just kept getting thicker, almost to the point that they couldn't even see each other, let alone anything further ahead than a meter. The deeper they went, the more the voices called out, warning them to leave, but Kendo kept them going. Soon though, more voices were added, only these voices were laughing. New souls to feast on. Then they saw them, 3 Tengu coming at them from above, and definitely not moving on strings. "Kendo," Tetsu whimpered. "I saw them," Kendo stated, but Tetsu just pointed in front of them. Now even Kendo was scared, because right in their path was a glowing red circle and a bouncing red and blue flame. What was going on here, and who was doing this? "Feast on their souls," the Tengu cried out, and with that, their courage broke and they ran screaming out of the forest and back to camp. "Well, for this one, there's no question about the winners," Mandalay stated. "By an overwhelming margin, the winners are Todoroki Shoto and Midoriya Izuku with their fog and Tengu act." "How did you do that anyways?" Todoroki smiled as he provided the answer. "I cooled the air enough for the fog to be created, then intensified my flame until it started turning blue." Izuku provided the voices for the lost souls and played Tengu by putting a mask in each hand and one on his right leg. With the passing of the day that Izuku expected the attack, Aizawa handed out the students' phones, allowing them to call their parents for the first time since the camp started. Mere hours later, all for one had passed the location of the camp to Tamura, who passed it on to Dabi. By this point, Dabi had become Tamura's right-hand man and was put in charge of the Vanguard Action Squad, as well as being given equal control of the Nomu. As such, Dabi was able to order the VS however he wanted, and he was going to take full advantage of that. Alright, listen up. We're going to run this how Stain would have. That means no harming the students any more than absolutely necessary to get our targets. That especially applies to the two of you, he added, glaring at Muscular and the truly insane Moonfish. The two of them were easily among the most bloodthirsty of the lot, including Toga, who literally drank blood. If you want to go all out, do it against the adults, no one else. Next, these two are not to be harmed whatsoever, Dabi continued, holding up 2 photographs. They are mine and mine alone to deal with, got that? If any of you mess with them, I'll turn you into ash. Each member of the VS nodded their assent, however reluctantly. Finally, here's a list of our targets and pictures of them. Do not lose them or I won't be the one killing you, Shigaraki will. And what about Ingenium? Spinner asked. These are students, Spinner, Dabi growled out. Holding true to Stain's principles means that we do not kill kids. They are still learning what it means to be a hero, which means they can still change and grow into true heroes. Stain's principles are what we need to follow, not his madness. Camp continued to pass silently, with the only real excitement coming from 3 sources: Minoma's continued provocations against Mineta's spying attempts, all thwarted, and Izuku attempting to break through Koda's walls. 3 days passed like that until, on the final night of the summer camp, the Pussycats once again had the classes divide up, this time for a scavenger hunt through the forest. However, a mere 30 minutes into the hunt, purple smoke could be seen in the forest, as well as signs of a fire. Everyone in the forest, put your masks on now. Izuku called into the radio he was wearing. Momo had come up with the idea when he had privately explained that he was expecting the attack to come while they were separated. Izuku had been so proud of her for thinking of that when he had forgotten to, especially since it had shown yet again that she had the capability to be a leader. Then he was distracted as Ragdoll was covered in a red aura and dragged away. Magna once again threatened the Pussycat's life, only for Spinner to interrupt. When deciding if someone should live or die, we must be careful to abide by Stain's principles. And what principles are those? Izuku demanded. I've actually looked into what he said, and nothing makes sense. He held All Might up as the ultimate hero, yet everything he complained about, All Might did as well. Stain even attacked those who did nothing that he complained about. I counted at least 6 heroes that Stain killed who, by his own reasoning, did nothing wrong. Spinner froze at that. He thought back at those that Stain had attacked and paled, realizing that, as much as he hated to admit it, the young hero was right. What did All Might do that made him different? There were so many All Might endorsements that he doubted even the hero knew what all carried his name. This would require some serious thinking. Even ignoring his hypocrisy, what could the Pussycats have done against Stain's beliefs? They're rescue heroes, not glory seekers or money hounds. All they want to do is live a normal life when not working and save lives when they are. Izuku finished. His arguments knocked Spinner so off balance that Tiger was able to easily take him out. Mandalay then turned to Izuku and ordered, "Return to camp, you're in charge on the way there. Don't engage anyone." "Can't do that," Izuku said. "Ida, you get everyone else back to Aizawa and Vlad. Defend yourselves if necessary." "Wait, what are you doing?" Mandalay demanded. "I need to save Koda," Izuku explained before taking off with Float. Thankfully, between his increased speed and flight, he was able to reach Koda and Muscular much quicker than the first time, and he sent the villain flying into the rock wall with a solid Manhattan smash. "What are you doing?" Koda asked as Muscular flew into the cliffside. "Everything's going to be okay, Koda," Valiant responded with a smile. "Because I am here to protect you." "Well now, isn't that a familiar line?" Muscular said with a grin. "I hope you intend to try to keep that promise with all your strength, Midoriya Izuku. Before we start this little game, I wonder if you could help me out." "With what?" Izuku asked, though he was fairly sure what the villain wanted. Even though Kaken hadn't gone nuts at the sports festival, there was no way All for One and Shigaraki wouldn't be interested in him. "We're looking for a few people. Now, let's see," he stated, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a piece of paper. Where can I find Bakugo Katsuki, Kamakiri Taguru, Kuwaro Shirhai, Mineta Minoru, Minoma Nito, Shisada Juroda, Shoji Mizo, Todoroki Shoto, and Tokoyami Fumikage? Izuku stared in shock, not that his face showed it. Why were there so many students on the league's list now? Did calming Kakendown really change that much? And why those students? Shoto made sense, assuming he was right about who Dabi was, but why the others? I'm going to guess by your silence that the answer is no. Good, that means we can get to the real fun and fight. Muscular went to punch Valiant, but a quick jump to the side allowed him to dodge it. Tell me something, what makes you think I'd even consider telling a murderer like you where my classmates are? Simple kid. If you do, I'll make your death nice and painless. Otherwise, I'm going to have fun just beating you to a pulp. Muscular threw yet another punch, but once again Valiant dodged it, resulting in the cliff wall gaining a large crater. You'd have to be fast enough to hit me first, Valiant called back. With that, he started hitting the villain as hard and fast as he could, coming from every direction he could. Muscular kept bulking up to the point that his body was completely out of scale with his head, but even Koda could tell that he just wasn't fast enough to keep up with Midoriya. Koda stared as this high school student. No, this hero moved so fast that to his eyes, he was just a blur of color, all to protect him from the monster that killed his parents. Why would he do that for him, after all he'd said and done? The only reason that made any sense was the one reason that, honestly, still didn't make any sense to Koda. He did it because he was a hero. Because he was willing to risk his life to protect someone he hardly knew. Midoriya even took a hit to protect him when the villain decided that he was too fast to hit and tried to take out Koda. However, the boy had noticed a couple of problems. First and more immediately for him, Midoriya was almost creating a tornado on the cliff, which meant that Koda had to back away from the fight, if it could actually be called a fight. Muscular hadn't even managed to lay a finger on Midoriya outside of the one sacrificial hit. Honestly though, Koda didn't care about any of that. First, he could still watch even from his safe spot around the corner, and second, who cared if the villain could actually fight back? This was the monster that killed his parents. The second problem that Koda had noticed was growing worse and worse though. The wall that Midoriya had been launching himself off of was cracking, and any minute now, it would collapse. And as Midoriya called out, "Kansas Smash," it happened. The entire wall collapsed, starting a rock slide that overwhelmed the villain, sending him tumbling to the valley below. Koda cried out in fear that his hero had gone down as well, only to realize that Midoriya was flying. Sorry, Koda, I don't think you're going to be able to come up here anymore unless you're willing to let Pixie Bob know about it. Now, get on my back, we're not done yet. What do you mean? Koda asked as they took off. There are more villains down in the valley, and while I don't think they're all on this guy's level, all our lives are in danger. We need to warn the Pussycats and Aizawa-sensei. Also, because of the fire, you can help if you're willing to. Koda had barely nodded when they spotted Aizawa. Sensei, I've got some information for you. With that, Izuku briefly told him what had happened with Muscular, including the fact that the villains were after students. What happened to your arm? Did you go too far again? Aizawa demanded. No, just had to sacrifice an arm to protect Koda. And no, I didn't forget about Hosu. Aizawa thought about what he said and made a decision. Fine, but tell Mandalay something for me as well. Can I have it in writing? I don't want her thinking I'm just telling her what I want to do. Aizawa raised an eyebrow, silently demanding to know what he meant. I already told the others to defend themselves if necessary, Izuku confessed. Right? Aizawa grumbled. The problem child should consider himself lucky that I always carry a pen and paper, he thought as he wrote the note, along with a secret note that would confirm the message was actually from him. No more than 30 seconds later, Izuku took down Spinner and destroyed his weapon. With that done, Izuku delivered his messages. Mandalay. Koda's safe and with Aizawa-sensei. Ragdoll, I need you to tell me where Katsuki and Shoto are. Also, I have 2 messages for Mandalay to send out. First, he delivered Aizawa's handwritten message, which Mandalay didn't want to believe, but the message referenced a case that no one outside of the Pussycats and Eraserhead knew about. Then Izuku handed her the second message, and Mandalay's eyes rose in shock. No wonder Aizawa was so insistent on the students defending themselves. Classes A and B. By orders of Eraserhead, you are hereby permitted to fight back against the villains. Use your training. Also, the villains are targeting you students. Bakogu Katsuki, Kamakiri Taguru, Kuwaro Shirhai, Mineta Minoru, Minoma Nito, Shisada Juroda, Shoji Mizo, Todoroki Shoto and Tokoyami Fumikage, all of you are targets. Avoid combat, stick to a group and get back to camp as quickly as possible. While the message was being sent out, Izuku flew over the forest looking for those who had been doing the scavenger hunt. Once again he heard gunshots, but now he knew that they were coming from the center of the gas. Well, that explained what he had heard about Kendo and Tetsu last time. Of course, the fact that the villain carried a gun meant he must not be very good at hand-to-hand combat, making him easy prey for Tetsu. As he flew deeper into the forest, though, another sound came to his ears, the sound of people fighting. Figuring his classmates had found a villain, Valiant charged towards the sounds. What he found, though, was not what he expected. "What is going on here?" he asked aloud. Kirishima was being attacked by Kamakiri, Sato was attacking Tsuburaba, Ashido was attacking Bondo, while Komori danced around. And why were there mushrooms everywhere? Ill-met by moonlight, aspiring hero, came a voice that Izuku didn't recognize. When he found the source, he stared in confusion at what he was actually seeing. The being he found looked even less human than Tokoyami did, as he had green skin, pointed ears and an overly long, pointed chin. Oddly, he only wore a vest and shorts along with knee-high boots, all in purple. "Who are you?" Valiant demanded. "I am that merry wanderer of the night. Those that hobgoblin call me, and Sweet Puck, that shrewd and knavish sprite called Robin Goodfellow," the villain said as an introduction. Valiant just stared in confusion. Why, of all gimmicks did he have to choose speaking in verse? "Churl, upon thy eyes I throw all the power this charm doth owe." Then there was a flash of light, and to Izuku's surprise, the landscape had completely changed. No longer was there a forest, but a hellscape with a red sky, scorched land and dead trees as far as the eye could see. "What's going on?" Izuku wondered aloud. A tingle along his spine warned him of danger, but he couldn't see anything coming. Suddenly, there was an impact to his left arm, right where Muscular had hit it. What was going on? What do I know about his quirk? When I first showed up, everyone was fighting each other, and now I'm somewhere completely different from where I was. Also, I'm getting hit without seeing anything. That adds up to an illusion quirk, he shouted out, just before he took another hit to his broken arm. "Thou speakst wiser than thou art whereof," Puck replied. "And here we wander in illusions. Let no blessed power deliver us from hence. You don't get it, do you? Now that I know what your quirk is, I can beat you." With that, Valiant closed his eyes, listened to his danger sense, and when the time was right, sent an Iowa smash into the villain. Instantly, all the illusions that Puck had created vanished and everyone started looking around in a daze. Why are we fighting each other?" Kirishima asked. "Blame the villain over there," Izuku answered, pointing to where Puck had landed upside down and back first against a tree. "Midoriya, you should go back," Kamakiri said. "That arm of yours really needs tended to." Izuku looked down at his arm, and was shocked at how much damage Puck had done. The bone was actually sticking out of his arm now, and he had mushrooms growing all over the place. "Huh, never had that happen before," he said as he brushed the mushrooms off. He was actually kind of excited about this. It had been a while since he'd had a new kind of injury. How would Recovery Girl's quirk work this time? Seriously? Oh, had he been talking out loud? Once their shock had died down some, Izuku ordered the others to carry Puck back to the campsite. About half of them agreed immediately, all but one agreed when he gave them a look colder than even Shoto could produce. "You're going after cats, aren't you, Midoriya?" Kirishima demanded. "Well, if you are, then I'm going as well, and there's no way you're leaving me behind." Izuku just shook his head, knowing there was no way that Kirishima was going to be left behind. Kirishima had been so upset the last time because he couldn't help, and they hadn't even been dating at the time. Apparently the trip to Island had been their first official date this time around. But how would he react to Kaken's plan? Izuku could only guess, though he didn't think it would be very pretty. Alright, you can come. Just to warn you though, we're probably going to have to deal with Dark Shadow first. Shoto was groaning inside. Why couldn't Izuku have told them how creepy this maniac was? Bakugo, how precise can you be with your explosions? He asked his partner as he raised a new ice wall. Not precise enough for what you're thinking, Icy Hot, the blonde growled out. This camp has been focusing on increasing our power, remember? And Deku never worked with me on precision attacks, little bastard. Shoto silently grumbled about the blonde, as he was sure it was mostly his fault and not Izuku's that he'd failed to create any precision attacks. Bakugo was definitely the type to go for power over precision, and Izuku had worked with him several times on precision attacks. What was even more frustrating though was the fact that Shoto could feel that something was happening to his quirk. It had started the day they arrived and only grew stronger with each passing day. His ice was growing stronger, his fire hotter, and it took longer for him to become uncomfortable with the extreme temperatures. Now wasn't the time to focus on that though, he had to protect himself and Bakugo from this guy's. Were those seriously his teeth? Moonfish, he growled out, finally recognizing the villain. The cannibal had been taken down by some hero he'd honestly forgotten the name of and sentenced to death for his crimes, only to escape even with his quirk being suppressed. Then his ice walls shattered as the teeth struck them and came after the teens. Damn it, I got distracted. Shoto raised another ice wall, but he could tell that something was different now. Moonfish tried another attack, but to everyone's shock, his teeth were what shattered on impact, not the ice. The man struck the ice again, only to get the same result. What the hell, Icy Hot? Why didn't you do that sooner? I don't think I could have, Shoto responded. He raised his left hand to call up his flames, and discovered that they immediately came out blue, and he couldn't cool them down to their normal red. What was more, he could sense them in a way that he couldn't before, much like Kido said that his quirk worked, as well as others with telekinetic powers. And that raised some interesting questions. What could he do with his fire now? So, while Moonfish showed his insanity by continuing to attack the ice wall, Shoto started experimenting with a small fireball and soon discovered that he could make it do anything he wanted it to. Oh yeah, he could work with this. Oi, Icy Hot. Stop playing around. That maniac could break through the ice any second. No, he won't, Shoto stated with certainty. He didn't know how he knew, but he knew that his ice was all but indestructible now. Then he'll eventually wise up and go around. Either way, we need to keep an eye on him until Bird Boy shows up. Shoto decided that just keeping the serial killer busy was too passive for him and threw a fireball into the air. What the hell are you doing? Bakugo demanded. Shoto refused to answer, focusing on the fireball. Once it was clear of the ice, he turned it, sending it to the heat source that he knew had to be Moonfish. An interesting new perk to his powers was that he could see heat, almost like he could see the world through infrared now. Combining that with his new pyrokinetic powers and he was guaranteed a hit. However, since he didn't want to be a killer, he extinguished the flames after the villain had burned for about 10 seconds. Okay, how the hell did you do that? Since when could you control your fire like that? And since when could you extinguish them on command? Can you do that to my explosions too? Shoto turned to stare at the blonde. You're reminding me of Izuku right now, you realize that? I'm starting to see how you two were friends when you were kids. Bakugo started stammering at that, but was spared further embarrassment by a crash from the forest and the sound of people yelling. Hey cats, Todoroki. We need some light. Kirishima yelled out. Huh, that's different from the first time, Bakugo said, creating a series of small but constant explosions. Well, he did pass the test this time, Shoto explained as he lit his arm up. Besides, he is your boyfriend. I'd have been more surprised if he didn't come. Once everything had calmed down, Tokoyami attempted to apologize for losing control of Dark Shadow. Shut up, Izuku interrupted. It's not your fault, anyone might have lost control in similar circumstances. But we do need to deal with this. And for that, I need to talk to Dark Shadow. Dark Shadow appeared, looking just as contrite as Tokoyami had a minute earlier. Now, do you have your own name? I call myself Kuro, the being answered. Tokoyami stared at it in shock. How had he never thought to ask that question himself? All right, Kuro. Now, we need to talk about what just happened. Like Tokoyami, You have no need to be upset with yourself about losing control. However, attacking Tokoyami was too far. The shadow whimpered at that, almost like he feared getting punished. That's something that we're going to be working on, understand? You need to be able to work with Tokoyami no matter how enraged the two of you are. But that will need to wait. Can you maintain control for the rest of the night? Kuro nodded and prepared to defend his partner and Tokoyami's friends. In the meantime, Izuku had contacted Momo and confirmed that almost everyone had made it safely back to the base camp, and that she had placed a tracker on a Nomu that had been beaten back by Kaibara-san and Shota Nairenjiki of B. The only ones missing now were his group, Uraraka and Tsu, who should be fighting Toga, considering how similar things were playing out. Right, as far as we know, the Pussycats are still fighting the League in the clearing, so the safest route is to cut straight through the forest. Is that an actual strategy, or based on your knowledge of the future? Kirishima asked. Pure strategy, because the first time, they had attacked us on our third night during the test of courage and Puck wasn't a member, not to mention we all had a harder time against the League. Now, do you want to argue more, or should we head back? Kirishima and the others nodded, and they cut through the woods, only to encounter Uraraka and Tsu fighting Toga, though it looked like she hadn't gotten any of their blood yet. The three girls stopped fighting when the boys showed up, and Toga couldn't take her eyes off of Izuku. Her distraction allowed Uraraka to get the upper hand and Kirishima to capture her. Sorry, but you're not taking her. She's crazy, but I actually like her, a raspy voice called from the woods. Izuku and Shoto stared at the man. Before them, Izuku checking to see if there were any differences between the two times he had seen the older man and Shoto for any sign that their suspicions were correct. The older man though only had eyes for one person. Sho, tell the old man that the day of reckoning is coming, and he shall pay for his sins. Mr. Compress, it's time to go. With that he raised a wall of flames and the two villains escaped. Mr. Compress? Izuku and Shoto whirled around to look at their group, only to realize that Shoji, Tokoyami and Bakugu were all missing. You bastard! Izuku yelled at the masked villain. Now, I'm only doing my job, no need to throw insults around, Compress called back. At the rendezvous point for the Vanguard Action Squad, Dabi was dealing with the craziness that was Twice. The dual personality was such a pain in the ass to deal with, yet it was also charming in its own way. He was a little disappointed that Toga had only gotten the blood of 2 people, but it could have been worse. He was also a little worried about Toga. What kind of person could she have fallen for out here? Then a rushing sound came at them, and Compress crashed to the ground with Kirishima and his baby brother on top of him, while Midoriya crashed on top of Twice's arm. Twice cried out in pain, before he started laughing of all things. Twice, get it together, Dabi said. We need to get out of here. My arm, it hurts, but even though it hurts, I'm not disappearing. Dabi, I couldn't be better if I tried. Heroes, it's time for you to learn just how good I am with my quirk. With that, Twice started making copies of himself, something that Dabi and Shigaraki had learned that he said he would never do. What the hell happened? Wait, Compress. Dabi sent a wave of fire at the 2 heroes, only to be surprised when his fire seemed to just disappear a few feet from the trio. Sorry, but fire's not going to work against me any longer, Shoto called out, his left hand raised as if he'd been blocking the fire. Dabi stared at his little brother in shock. Since when could he do that? The old man couldn't do that, so how could he? Kirishima, keep Compress under control, Shoto ordered. The redhead nodded, and Shoto came charging at Dabi. Then, to Dabi's surprise, Shoto cut the 2 of them off from the rest with his ice. Hello, Nai-san, Shoto stated. You could have warned me that you were coming today, you know. Now where's the fun in that? Dabi asked. How did you even find me, little brother? And since when could you control fire like that? Finding you, well, that's a bit of a story, but let's just say that Midoriya has some interesting contacts. For the fire, that's new. Do you like it? He asked, showing his new, blue flames. Your quirk awakened? Baby brother, I'm extremely impressed. But we need to get back to our real lives. With that, the brothers melted out of Shoto's igloo. Dabi stared at the results of the fight. Twice still had a small squad of copies, but Valiant was easily defeating them. Toga had been knocked out, with another copy of Twice, he thought, holding her. The Nomu was gone, probably through Kurojire's portal. Compress though was still held down by Red Riot, so Dabi sent another wave of flames at the young hero. The hero instinctively dodged the flames, allowing Compress to escape, but he called out, "Got them. Let's go," before running back towards their camp just as Kurojire and the Nomu arrived. Dear little Valiant though wasn't ready to go or let them escape though. He sped to Compress, only to hit him on the back of the head, forcing him to cough up 3 of his marbles. "Sorry, but no magician's trick is going to fool me twice." "Wait, what? What did that mean?" Fortunately, he only grabbed 2 of the marbles, allowing Dabi to reclaim the 3rd. "Which one do we have?" he demanded. Instantly Compress undid his trick, revealing that they still had the most powerful of them, Baku. "Let's get out of here now," Dabi ordered, placing his hand around Bakugu's neck. Kurojire's warp gates allowed each member of the Vis to escape, though not before both Toga and Bakugu got some last words out. Toga went and flirted with Midoriya, while Bakugu called out, "Stick to the plan, de." Well, that was curious. Just one more thing to discuss with the explosive blonde. When the final count was finished, 4 students had to be treated for gas exposure, 5 had injuries of varying degree with Izuku being the worst off, and Bakugu Katsuki had been kidnapped. Izuku just smiled when he heard the results and whispered to himself, "Phase 1, complete." Honestly, that could have hardly gone better. Around the nation, word had spread of Bakugu Katsuki's kidnapping by the League of Villains, and one group was already planning to take advantage of it. "The storm has come," the masked man stated. "Prepare for it to break. You know what to do." "Yes, sir," his 9 most loyal stated. What they couldn't know was that their actions would shake the entire nation. Chapter 15. In this ground, it's do or die. 2 days after the attack, Kirishima called a meeting of 1A at Takoba Beach. Izuku smiled at the text, knowing exactly what it was going to be about. Everyone else on the other hand was shocked when the redhead gestured to Momo. With the assistance of Aways from Class B, I attached a transceiver device to the Nomu that showed up. I created a tracker and gave it to Detective Tsukachi yesterday. If you want, I can make another so you can go after Bakugu. You would dare go against everything our teachers have taught us? Ida demanded, his mind flashing back to Hosu. "We can't get involved, we need to leave this to the professionals." "How can I?" Kirishima demanded. "My boyfriend was kidnapped by villains and I was unable to stop it. How can I call myself a man, let alone a hero, if I do nothing now?" "Wait, let me get this straight," Ashido said. "Yaomomo intends to create another tracker for a device that's on a Nomu, and you think it will let you save Bakugo?" "I understand how you feel," Kirishima, Shoji stated. "But this is no time to let our emotions get the better of us. However, I would like to hear Midoriya's thoughts on this, especially considering Bakugu's last words. We're all shocked about Bakugu's kidnapping, but we have to think about this calmly, rationally. Your feelings don't matter, or your intentions. If you go out there to fight, knowing you're breaking the rules, then your actions are those of villains, not heroes," Tsu argued. "We'd be vigilantes, not villains," Izuku countered. "And I'd rather be a vigilante with a clean conscience than a hero who can stand by and let innocents die because the rules say, don't get involved." That was a rule he'd come up with after leaving Eri at the advice of Mirio. He'd been so brokenhearted at it that he vowed never to let something like that happen again, not on his watch. He turned to the others, looking each of them in the eyes before continuing. "If that's something you're not comfortable with, then you can leave, because there is nothing that will stop me from doing what I know is right, no matter the opposition or what the rules say." Tsu was the first to leave, followed closely by Ida, who was practically steaming in rage at Izuku's words. Everyone else just stayed put, waiting to hear what he would say next. "Okay, to answer Shoji's question, this is the plan. We knew that the League would want to attack the training camp, we just didn't know for certain when they would do so. We also knew that they would want to capture at least one of us, so Kaken decided to let himself be taken." "What do you mean he let himself get captured?" Mineta whined. "Yeah, why would Bakuga do that?" Kaminari asked. "Because his kidnapping is a key move to taking down the brains behind the League of Villains," Izuku said. Everyone started talking at once, but Izuku put a stop to that with a sharp whistle. "I will explain everything after we get Kaken back, I promise." The point is that Kaken's kidnapping has led the police and heroes to where the boss is hiding. However, since they aren't expecting him to show up, they can't rescue Kaken. That's where we come in. We get Kaken out, so that All Might can take out the boss. All for one. At the mention of All for One, Aoyama squeaked and ran off. How powerful is this All for One guy? Bujiro asked. He's the most powerful villain that we could ever face, no questions asked. He fought All Might to a standstill 6 years ago and is the reason that All Might spent his young age in America, Izuku answered. Mineta ran off at that, no surprises there. Then what are we supposed to do? Uraraka asked. And how can we help? Came another, familiar voice. Everyone turned to the source of the voice and found Kendo and most of class be standing there. Tetsu here heard about Kirishima's plan to meet you guys here and insisted we join, Kendo explained. So, how can we help? Are you guys up for some vigilante work? Izuku asked. Every member of B there gave their assent, causing a smile to show up on Izuku's face. Right then, to rescue Kaken, I just need Momo, Shoto and Kirishima to join me. Kendo, I want you to pick out the classmates that are best suited for rescue work. I want teams D, R, S and M to join them. Momo, where's the tracker pointing us? To a location near Tokyo Bay in Yokohama, Kamino Ward to be exact, Momo answered. Oh, and you realize that you included everyone in the rescue work, right? Izuku stared at her. I did? Oh, well then everyone get ready. Kendo, you will lead the rescue group close to the coordinates, but I don't want you getting there until at least an hour after we do, preferably 2. Momo, once Kaken's been recovered, I want you to join them and help Kendo lead the rescue team. Just so you know, this is going to be a clash of the titans, so you need to stay safe until All for One is defeated. Will do, Valiant, Kendo responded, before naming off the classmates she wanted to join her. All of you, get your costumes on. If we're going to be helping people, we should be wearing our costumes. I need to speak to you in private. Dabi looked up at the speaker, and wasn't surprised at seeing who was asking. Kurojairi, send us to my usual place and no listening in. You're letting him join you? Kurojairi asked in shock. The scarred man wouldn't even let him or Shigaraki join him, so why Spinner, and why now? Just do it or I'll burn this place down. Kurojairi grumbled, but did as he asked and allowed Dabi and Spinner through. Dabi took a deep breath of the fresh air before turning to face the other vigilante. Where are we? Spinner asked. Fuji, about halfway up the mountain and halfway between the Yoshida and Subashiri trails. It's pretty peaceful here, and I like coming up here to think. Now, what's up, Spinner? Spinner hesitated before answering. You seem to be the only one here who is actually as devoted to Stain as I am, so I hope that you can help me with something. Let me guess, Midoriya said something, right? The reptilian vigilante stared at him in shock. Trust me, based on everything I've heard about him, that was the most logical explanation. So, what exactly did he say that you need to talk to me about? He asked me about Stain's principles, and essentially how I could follow a hypocrite. Dabi chuckled. Yeah, sounds like him all right. He likes challenging our views on heroes. As I told the others, how we hold true to Stain is that we follow his actual ideals, not how he acted. Unfortunately, that means we need to take our time, because we need to see who actually acts like heroes and who is actually just in it for the money or the glory. What do you mean? Spinner asked. Let's go with an example. 2 heroes, each with fire powers. One proclaims that he fights for the people, one says he's only in it for the money. Going off what Stain said, it should be obvious who is the false hero, right? Spinner nodded, but he realized where Dabi was going. But there's more to learn if one starts digging, right? Bingo! The true hero doesn't care about property damage or collateral damage, and worse, he abuses his wife and children. The one who says he wants to get rich though, well, most of his hero work is the kind of stuff you'd only hear about in human interest stories. He gives his money away to the homeless, or to someone who can't pay their rent. He catches enough villains to make money, but doesn't go out of his way to find and fight them. He's also kind enough to take a hurt kid angry at the world and show him that not all heroes are hiding something. At the last part, Dabi had become almost wistful, as if he were reminiscing. That inspired Spinner to make his leap of faith. You're one of the first heroes abused children, and the second helped you after you escaped. Who are they? The real hero was called Phoenix, and he was one of Stain's purged heroes from 3 years ago. My father, well, I'm sure I don't need to tell you who he is. Spinner shook his head. No, his father was quite famous, and no words needed to be said to show he knew exactly who Dobby really was. The 4 of them actually had to dodge midnight and snipe when they boarded the train. Thankfully, the 2 pros were delayed by the civilians, who easily recognized them even though they were out of costume. The group of vigilantes immediately knew what must have happened to cause the teachers to show up. Ida had squealed on them. With any luck though, the rescue team wouldn't have to worry about that. So, Midoriya, how much of the future do you actually know? Momo asked about half an hour later. Izuku looked at the 2 people who didn't know the truth yet and gave them a straight answer for once. Enough to know that we don't need the disguises you're thinking about getting. The League has no idea that we're coming, or at least they shouldn't. And why didn't you have me put a tracker on Bakugo if him getting kidnapped was part of the plan? Because All for One has a teleporting quirk, and that will allow him to bring Kaken from the League's current HQ to him, and he is in a Noma factory. A Noma factory? The other 3 whispered in shock. You'd left that little fact out before, Shoto complained. It's not important, Izuku said. Mount Lady destroys it, or at least part of it tonight. Just to be on the safe side though, I would like it if you created some small explosives for us, Momo. It's probably not the only place Nomus can be found, but taking out as many as possible can only be a good thing, right? Momo agreed, and Izuku bought her some snacks to make it up to her. By the time they arrived at Kamino, they had a bag containing more than a dozen shaped explosives. They left the train at Shintakashima Station and were immediately greeted by, "It's you, eh?" Momo turned to give Izuku a dirty look, but he only pointed up at the Jumbotron and the newscast being shown there. We'd like to apologize, Aizawa started. A recent incident has allowed harm to come to 10 first-year heroes, and we staff were ill-prepared. It is our duty to train heroes, but also to protect them while they are training. We apologize for any trauma caused by our negligence, and any unease this may have caused you. Question from Enichi. Since the start of the school year, this is the 5th time that at least one UA student has encountered villains. While you have publicly claimed an increase in security measures, what measures specifically have you taken and were taken this time? Nizu answered that question. While I refuse to answer the specifics of the security around the school, as that would only invite more attacks, we have increased surveillance around the school and revamped our defenses, with the help of the renowned scientist Dr. David Shield as well as our own support department. For this occurrence, only the teachers directly involved and myself knew exactly where the students would be beforehand, and all the students had their phones confiscated for the first few days of the trip. There were no computer records of the trip, and all discussions were privately held between the 3 of us and the wild pussycats. We honestly aren't sure how the villains discovered the camp. Izuku smiled, knowing that things truly had changed now. Rather than look on UA with suspicion and treating them like villains, the press were supportive of UA, and it was clear looking at the crowd that they stood by UA as well. This was a very good sign. My Sakura, I'm with the Tama Tokyo Nippo, so I hate to ask this, but I must. You claimed to act with the students' safety in mind, yet you told them to fight at the training camp, putting them in grave danger. Why did you do that? Because of all the potential outcomes, and knowing that the villains had come specifically to kidnap at least one of them, allowing them to defend themselves was the best possible choice. When compared to the worst possible outcome, there was no question about what should have been done, Aizawa stated. Yamazaki Nezumi of the Mainichi Shimbun. Tell me, why were the students targeted? Bakugo Katsuki has shown several times that he has a ferocious temper, and several of the other students have shown worrying tendencies as well, and let's not forget the prejudice against mutant-type quirks. Isn't it possible that they were targeted because the villains think they could persuade the students to join them in the path to evil? If so, then they are gravely mistaken, more so with Bakugo Katsuki than with anyone else save one. As for your other accusations, perhaps one should consider working to end the prejudice against mutant types. Anyone deemed a loser is just shoved aside. Our war is based on a few simple questions. What is a hero? What is justice? Is this what society's really supposed to be like? Once we get people thinking about that, we've won. And you like winning, don't you? Shigaraki asked. Dabi let him go. We're supposed to be recruiting, right? So we should treat him as an equal. Besides, he's got to be smart enough to know he can't take us all on. Alright, but I think this is a horrible idea, Shigaraki, Dabi stated. The others started up their recruitment speech while the fireball unshackled Katsuki. You guys give some pretty good speeches, you know that? He stated as he rubbed his wrists. I'm sure all of you have grievances, some of them might even be legitimate like Gecko over there or Fireball. But let's get one thing straight. You guys aren't calling the shots here, not even your bosses. We have been for weeks now. Your magnet guy fell easily, and he didn't even succeed in corrupting Dr. Shield. And kidnapping me? Well, that was a part of the plan that I was happy to volunteer for. What are you going on about? Circus asked. What's wrong? Not obvious enough for you pea-brains. I was bait, and you took me in hook, line and sinker. My kidnapping is the final push needed to get the police and the heroes to find you all and take you down. Yeah, that includes even you, all for one. While Katsuki talked, he continued something that he'd been doing since he was captured. He did his absolute best to maximize the sweat he produced. Back when they were 10, Deku had mentioned that his explosions were larger the closer they got to exams, and when he looked into it, he learned that stress helped produce sweat. Since then, he had started talking to himself before and during events that he'd need his quirk at its strongest. Before the exams, he had gone all out, both being terrified of All Might and excited at the possibility of fighting him. Now though, he had the added stress of being a captive and the knowledge that this would be All Might's final battle. Now he was ready for one of his largest explosions. Yet for once, he held it back. Deku had told him that his other self had revealed he wasn't held for long, and that All Might showed up about the time that the press conference made the news. So, why waste the explosion? While he'd been thinking, the villains had been chatting, saying that he was stupid for not playing along. Why would I do that? He demanded. With me, what you see is what you get. I don't have any secrets of my own. If you bastards think that's a problem, then so be it. I will only ever be myself, and I am a hero. With that, the Hands bastard called on his master for help. A wise decision, Shigaraki Tamura. The four friends had just arrived at the Noma factory and were quick to discover the window that they had the first time. With some aid from Kirishima acting as his eyes, Izuku started tossing the shaped charges at the Nomu tanks. Just as they finished, Kirishima asked, "What's going on?" while pointing at a truck that was rising into the air. "M'lady," Izuku answered with a smile. "Momo, prepare to detonate." The second that MP Lady put her foot down, every Nomu tank exploded. "The Nomu are dead," Best Jeanist reported. "It appears that their tanks detonated on impact." The four students shared a grin, until an overwhelming presence made itself known. The presence further made itself known by a massive explosion, one far greater than MT Lady had been able to accomplish. The presence was so overwhelming, in fact, that only Izuku himself was able to withstand it, and that only because he'd been there before. And as he expected, he soon heard the voice of Kaken. Good. Then as soon as he started to fight back, this would all be over for them. Katsuki stared at the clash of the titans happening before him. Even with Deku's explanation of who All for One was, he was still shocked to see just how powerful he was. To be able to not only match but to throw back All Might. Good God, but now he could understand how this guy ruled the underworld for so long. Now, all he needed to do was fight back, and Deku along with Ige would be there to get him out. But first, it was time to do something a little reckless. "Hey, All for One. About that offer of yours, I have an answer for you." "Oh, and what is your answer?" Kaken gave one of his signature grins before raising his hands and unleashing his largest explosion ever, all aimed directly at the villain. He didn't expect the blast to do much to the villain, and he was proven correct. "That was a poor decision, Bakugo Katsuki," All for One said as the smoke cleared. The blast had barely even damaged his suit, leaving it only slightly torn and burned in places. "Tamura, teach this boy a lesson about what happens to those who deny a generous offer." With that, the symbol of evil turned back to All Might. Katsuki turned to face the League of Villains, only to be surprised when the Hands bastard appeared behind him. "You heard what my master said. Besides, can you imagine the look on All Might's face when he realizes that he couldn't even save all of you?" Katsuki spun around, only for Shigaraki to grab his upper arm. and he could only scream in pain in response. Izuku paled when he heard Kaken scream after the explosion. Kirishima turned just as pale, while Shoto stared at him in shock. What the hell had happened? It didn't matter though, they had no time to waste. "Grab onto me now," he ordered, using the same tone he did when he had to take control of their exercises at UA. Shoto had teasingly called it his dad-might voice, but even that couldn't calm him down right now. Momo grabbed one of his arms, while Kirishima grabbed the other and Shoto held him under his arms, something that he couldn't think about right now. With his friends secure, he took off and flew out to Kaken, ignoring the shock that both Momo and Kirishima expressed. But the shock at what they found was even greater. Katsuki, of all people, was on his knees, but when they looked closer, they all saw why. His left arm was lying on the ground, with only a stump left connected to his shoulder. Shigaraki had removed Kaken's arm. Shigaraki had removed Kaken's arm. Shigaraki had disintegrated Kaken's arm. It took every ounce of control Izuku had to not kill Shigaraki at that moment. Fortunately, the pressure of Momo and Kirishima's hands as well as Shoto's continued hug kept him calm enough that he didn't try flying off to kill Shigaraki. Kirishima let go long enough to grab Kaken before returning, allowing them to fly off again, and for All Might to truly defeat All for One. "Are you sure we should be here?" Watanabe asked. "If that blast is anything to go by, this is going to be the biggest fight in the history of supers. How long until you trust my quirk, Yuma? This is where we need to be, nowhere else," Tanaka Kima responded. "Once we get the story, we'll move on." Just then, several kids landed right in front of the duo, and all of them were easily recognizable as UA first years. What was most shocking though was that one of them, the former hostage Bakugo Katsuki, was missing an arm. Todoroki quickly cauterized it, while Valiant ordered, "Momo, give him whatever medical treatment you can, then meet up with the others. They'll be needed soon." Creati nodded and ran off, apparently to meet with the others that Valiant had mentioned, probably other members of the Overcomers. "Excuse me, Valiant, but can I get an interview?" Kima asked, just as the entire crowd gasped in shock. The small group of heroes and reporters turned to discover that All Might had nearly been thrown into a helicopter, only for it to be saved by Gran Torino. "How did you rescue Ground Zero? And do you know anything about this villain that All Might is fighting?" "We will, just as soon as things have calmed down, Miss Tanaka," Valiant responded. "We won't tell you everything, but you can have your story. Right now, All Might is more important." "Yes, of course," Kima agreed. While this story would be important, she knew that was even more so. Just then, another blast came from the villain, and when the dust cleared, everyone stared in shock. None were more shocked, though, than Red Riot himself. "Midoriya, why did All Might turn into Toshinori-sensei?" "Wait, what?" Class A knew about this skinny version of All Might. Not now." Bakugo had his remaining hand on Kirishima's shoulder, apparently to get him to calm down. The redhead nodded and they all turned to the fight. Toshinori smiled, knowing that so far, everything was going according to plan, outside of young Bakugo's injury, that is. He only hoped that Dave and Melissa could help the boy out. Young Bakugo certainly had a future as a pro hero, and he didn't want to see that potential lost. "I'm surprised, All Might. I honestly expected you to look worse after our fight. What kept your will to live so strong after my defeat? No matter, the public now knows the truth. I hope you're not too ashamed. You may strip away my secrets, but you can't touch my spirit, All for One. So long as that remains, then I will always be the symbol of peace." Then came the action that Toshi had been waiting for. The symbol of evil revealed Tamura's identity, and he laughed in the villain's face. "You think I didn't know that? Did you think yourself clever giving him your name? One of my students suspected something immediately, and we found out what happened to my master's family, including the fact that Tenko went missing around the time that his family disintegrated. He may be my master's grandson, but it is our choices, not our heritage, that makes us who we are. And he has chosen to become a villain. For that, I will destroy you." For once, All for One was surprised. His shock lasted long enough for the other heroes to show up and rescue the wounded Best Jeanist as well as civilians who hadn't been evacuated before they had attacked the villains. However, the symbol of evil wasn't going to take that lying down. He combined 13 different quirks to create a limb so massively distorted, only he could have possibly used it. I wasn't certain until we exchanged blows, but that confirmed my suspicions. You no longer possess one for all. No, what you're using are just embers, the last sparks of a dying flame that you've already passed on. I don't even need to blow to put them out, they're dying on their own, and you're speeding it on its way every time you use it. Midoriya Izuku. He's the current wielder, the boy you passed it on to. Did you even know he'd come here tonight? You have no control over him at all. You've failed as a hero and a teacher. Their fists clashed, and once again, the villain used impact recoil to force All Might to take the pain of the blow all on himself. He was willing to take it though. This was nothing compared to what Izuku himself had gone through because of his poor training and teaching skills the first time. You're wrong again. I knew that he'd come here to rescue young Bakugo. But we made a vow together. Until I've finished training young Midoriya, until he's ready and has graduated, I refuse to die. Then, as a way to honor his apprentice, he used one of his moves, a St. Louis smash on the villain, further damaging the life support helmet. Then, before the villain could even hope to recover, he ended things with a United States of Smash. With that, the battle and his time as All Might had ended. But to reassure the people, he used what little power still remained to bulk up one last time in his victory stance. Within 5 minutes, young Yaoyorozu and young Kendo had led their rescue teams onto the scene and announced, "We are here to help." Toshinori smiled at that, as the two had proven to be great leaders in their scenarios at UA, and when others tried to stop the students, he stood up for them. I gave them permission to come and help. So leave them alone. He stayed long enough for the dawn to finally arrive, and a reporter to show up with a camera. He turned halfway away from the camera, and pointed towards it. Now it's your turn, he stated, knowing that his successor would be watching. Now it's your turn. In response to All Might's final words, Midoriya Izuku raised his hand to mimic his mentor's victory stance, a sign that he accepted the burden that was now on him. Beside him, Todoroki Shoto, Kirishima Eijiro and Bakugo Katsuki also raised their hands, showing their support for their classmate, stating for those who noticed that the overcomers stood as one. Yuma was quick to take a photo, making sure to do it in such a way that Valiant looked like he was in the center of the group. What a fight, Kima stated before turning back to the students. Now, let's talk about what happened. 3 of the students turned to look at Midoriya, who just gave them a look. The group held a silent discussion that finally ended with Midoriya turning back to the reporters. We're fine with that, but in a more private location. But Kirishima's going to take Kaken to a hospital first. The reporters led the other 2 to a private cafe, where the reporter ordered drinks for all of them. Fortunately, the reporter had made a good impression back during the stain incident, so they all had high hopes for the interview. So, what happened? What's the story behind Bakugo Katsuki's kidnapping? With that, Shoto and Izuku started the story they had agreed to in order to hide the truth. We knew that the camp would be targeted ahead of time, so we made secret plans to deal with it. First, we worked with the teachers to ensure that the camp would remain as secret as possible. However, considering All for One, that's the villain that All Might just defeated, we knew that may not be enough, so we made a contingency plan, Izuku stated. Kaken knew of the threat, and that his power at the very least would mean that the villains would target him to try and turn him against us. So he decided that he would let himself get kidnapped in order to motivate the police and heroes to find the League as fast as possible. And how did you know that the League would target the camp? We have a connection in the League who's willing to pass us information for personal reasons. He warned us of the League's plans to attack the camp, and that they intended to kidnap someone, Shoto stated. So you have a spy and you didn't tell the UA teachers? My contact has problems with at least some heroes, so no, we didn't tell them, Shoto continued. The duo then explained the full story of what happened at the camp, and how Momo provided them the opportunity to rescue Bakugo while All Might dealt with All for One. Izuku even filled them in on how All Might and All for One had fought before 6 years earlier, with All Might believing he had killed the villain while receiving a dangerous wound. We know it was vigilantism, but Izuku put it best. Better to be a vigilante with a clean conscience than a hero who can let others die because the rules say you can't get involved. And what happened to Bakugo Katsuki while he was kidnapped? I'll take over from here, guys, Kirishima stated, taking a free chair. First, Katz is at the hospital right now. Not much they can do about his arm, but other than that he'll be fine. With that, he then told the reporters what happened to the explosive student, including how the villains had tried to recruit him and how he'd lost his arm. He's honestly hoping that a support item will help him manage without the arm, Kirishima explained. Tanaka Kima nodded. With how powerful the boy was, she certainly hoped he'd stick with being a hero. He could honestly become even more of an inspiration now than he had before. Well, I think that's enough facts for at least one story. I only have one more question to ask. Do you have a message for the people worried about the future now? Valiant nodded before answering. First, to the heroes out there. It's time to stop infighting over how we're ranked and come together. Put aside any grudges or hard feelings. All for One may be down, but his League of Villains is still out there, and we need to finish the job. For the civilians out there, All Might may have retired, but we are still here, and we are ready, willing and able to pick up where he left off. Kima smiled at that, and she knew exactly what she was going to title her story on this up-and-coming hero. But I have more to say, Izuku stated. Kima looked up, even more interested now. We heroes are needed even more now than ever before, but in a way that is different from how we're used to seeing them. It's time to go back to old-school ways of looking at heroes, not as high-profile, superpowered police, but as ideals to aspire to. Heroes need to hold themselves to a higher standard, one that places them above reproach, no matter how much one looks into their lives. I want to see a world where the common person doesn't need to have someone save them because they can save themselves, and heroes are only needed to deal with disasters and the true supervillains like All for One. Anyone can be a hero through simple, ordinary, everyday actions. To a kid whose cat is stuck in a tree, the one who gets it down is a hero. When your neighbor needs help, even someone with an open ear can be a hero. Offer help to those who need it instead of thinking that a hero will come by and help them, because we heroes are only human and we can't be everywhere at once. Wait, so you agree with Stain? Kima asked in shock. Stain's words weren't entirely wrong, but his actions absolutely were. A hero shouldn't be judged by their motives, but by their actions. Are they willing to risk their lives to save even one more person? Will they face an overwhelming threat to protect others? That is what makes a true hero. Kima nodded, now even more certain that her conclusion had been decided. As if we didn't have enough problems on our hands, now we have this, Kishimoto Kazuko stated. The president of the Hero Public Safety Commission was glaring at the front-page story on the Tama Tokyo Nippo with the title Symbol of Hope. All Might as a symbol of peace was bad, but we could deal with it and control it, she continued. But this? We need to shut this kid down now. The only thing worse than a paragon is a young paragon, and it's even worse if they go on a crusade. Why are you so worried? Sujihara Hisoka asked. You said it yourself, he's a young paragon, we have plenty of things to tarnish his views. Except he's already dealt with at least some of them. Yokoyama Izanagi complained. He was one of the ones who fought Stain, and the bastard approved of him. Worse, he probably knows about the Todoroki situation, and was the one responsible for Endeavor's arrest. He turned back to the paper and started reading a portion of the article out loud. With the end of the Age of All Might, our symbol of peace, what we need most is hope for the future. Of all the heroes in this newest generation, I believe that no one embodies that hope more than Midoriya Izuku. The can-do hero, Valiant, is our symbol of hope. He threw the paper down in disgust. Such views are more dangerous than anything we've seen since these mutants first appeared last century. Everyone in the room agreed to that sentiment. What no one, not even the Diet, Prime Minister or Emperor, knew was that the Hero Public Safety Commission was and always had been run by the quirkless, specifically, those who were prejudiced against quirks. Their members were in the same vein as the weapons manufacturer Bolivar Trask, businesswoman Zhao Chen, and politicians like William Stryker, Robert Kelly and Jim Jaspers. As well as other like-minded groups had been doing their best to keep the heroes from doing the best they can. They were the ones to suggest heroes getting sponsored, leading to corruption, and they were the ones who introduced the hero billboard chart in order to increase competition and bad feelings between heroes. They subtly supported villains wherever possible, And some of them were not born quirkless but willingly gave their quirks to all for one. They had even managed to corrupt the morals of many heroes by getting them focused on the greater good over actually saving people. All of that to keep them under control and to keep the average person from seeing them as true heroes, saviors and examples to live up to. Oshiro Kaori raised a question. Alright then, what can we do then? Well, the best way to stop him would be to prevent him from getting a license, Fukuhara Toshio stated. That should be easy enough. Just tell Mara to have HUC go hard on him and take points for even the slightest problem. If we need more, then we can tell the participants from the other schools that whoever defeats him in the first round will automatically pass. Should that fail, though I doubt it will, we should subtly influence who he joins, Yokoyama suggested. UA's current Big Three is led by Mirio Togata, who works for Sasaki Mirai, All Might's only sidekick. He has completely bought our view on heroes and could influence the boy. And if that doesn't work? Kishimoto demanded. There's always him, Sujihara Yuichi suggested coldly. The others knew who he was talking about and considered the suggestion. While the man in question was currently in Tartarus, he had been such a great threat that only All Might could take him down, something that had certainly fueled Endeavor's rage. The only question was how to get him out of the prison. We'll keep the idea in mind, Kishimoto stated. For now, how is Project Rewind going? Nanaka Akiko spoke up there. Chisaki has the girl back and thanks to Tengai, we've given him enough funds to resume his research. Unfortunately, she had been under the protection of All Might and his friend, Tsukachi, and not only is the detective impossible to buy, but so is everyone else connected to them. As a result, we have no research to send to him, so all the progress he makes will have to be from where he left off. How long until he gets a permanent erasure drug? Oshiro asked. Impossible to say, even he has no idea when it will be ready, Nanaka answered. Whatever he needs, give it to him, Kishimoto ordered. He may be a mutant, but he has the right ideas about how to deal with this disease. And what about Hamurais? Fukuhara asked. Give them any information you can that will help them, but nothing more. I want the people to be on our side when it comes to quirks and begging for rewind once Chisaki finishes it. The day after the interview, Izuku and Tashinori met up at their beach again, and Tashinori talked Izuku into trying to talk to his mother again while Aizawa, Vlad and Nizu talked to the parents about everyone moving into the dorms. No one foresaw any problems from that though, as Yue's reputation was as high as ever. A side effect of the visit meant that the duo could also talk to the Bakugus about the dorm. The first talk didn't go so well, as Inko refused to even talk to them unless Izuku was willing to quit Yue. Bakugu Mitsuki on the other hand only had 2 questions. Is there anything that could have been done to save Kat's arm? No, Auntie, not unless Kaken was a completely different person, Izuku answered honestly. And do you believe that he can still be a hero short an arm? Ma'am, I lived with the injury that forced me to retire for 6 years. Your son is one of the students that I see the greatest potential in. I'm certain that this loss will only encourage him to grow even stronger, Toshi stated. I even called the Shields, and Melissa is coming to help build him a new arm. Izuku added. Mitsuki hugged Izuku at that, promising to talk to Inko about him, and giving Bakugu permission to move into the dorms. 3 days later, everyone had been approved to move into the dorms, and they were holding a class meeting outside, before those who had needed permission got to see the dorms for the first time. Kirishima, Yayarozu, Todoroki, Midoriya. You 4 broke the rules to even attempt at rescuing Bakugu that night. Consider yourselves lucky. Between All Might's retirement and your little interview, you've managed to not be expelled. For the rest of you, since you clearly knew about this, I would have expelled all of you save Bakugu, Azui, Ida, Jiro and Hagakure. All of you could have stopped them or told us, as Azui and Ida did, but you chose not to. You betrayed our trust, and that is something that will take time to rebuild. You will need to obey every rule to the letter and live as model students. Following that speech, those who had already moved in gave everyone a tour. Mineta quickly started acting even more pervy than usual, so Izuku gave a whistle. Right, that's enough. Everyone, I want you to gather in the living room to see something. Most of the class followed, utterly confused, but Uraraka, Momo and Shoto were smiling, knowing exactly what was about to happen. Izuku led them to one of the few computers in the dorm and opened up the student email. I prepared this email weeks ago, but I've been updating it with new information at every opportunity. It's time to finally deal with one of our class problems, so I'm sending this email to every member of the faculty. There's no need for you to do that, Midoriya, came the familiar voice of Principal Nizu. I've been aware of the problem for quite some time now. I was just waiting for evidence that it was going too far in your eyes. Now I have it. Mineta Minoru, you are hereby expelled from UA, and you will be blacklisted from all other hero programs in Japan. I do hope you haven't unpacked. While Mineta walked out of Heights Alliance, the others turned to look around the building for the speaker. Bakugo even managed to spot a paper that had been posted by the door. How did you know what I was about to do, sir? Izuku asked. I must admit to being a little paranoid, so I bugged all the common areas in the dorms. I am also the only one who has access to the recordings, so you don't need to worry about them getting out. Oh, and please don't try to find them. There's only one student in UA right now that could find them, and I'm not telling you who it is. Izuku could only shake his head. You really are a paranoid little mustelid, aren't you? Well then, sir, you should probably listen in to our next meeting tomorrow morning. What's happening tomorrow morning? Sato asked. You guys wanted the truth about me, right? Well, you're going to get it after breakfast. Today is about us moving in and resting. Anything stressful can be saved for tomorrow. I would be happy to join you, Midoriya. I'll see you then. With that settled, everyone started the process of moving in, with those who already had helping the rest. When it was done, the girls once again proposed the best room contest, which Izuku approved of with one condition. If anyone wants to opt out, they're allowed to. No one is allowed to force themselves in, or even allowed to look without permission. Everyone quickly agreed, with Tokoyami immediately opting out, followed by Ojiro and Bakugo. Most of the rooms were the same, with only Momo and Izuku's having changed. Had sent her bed back after 2 weeks, opting for a much smaller one in a similar style while increasing her library. Izuku's on the other hand still showed off a lot of his All Might merch, but with a bookcase for his now 24 hero analysis notebooks and one entire side was dedicated to his plans for 1A. What? I'm a proud fanboy, and I need to write some of my ideas down so I remember them for later. That's our class rep, the girls said with a smile. In the end, since Sato was actually still mixing up the cake this time, Shoto won the contest easily. Everyone went to bed, though Izuku felt off, like he'd forgotten something that was supposed to happen after the contest. He shrugged it off and fell asleep, looking forward to removing his burdens at last. The next morning, everyone gathered for their first breakfast in the dorms, and as one would expect, the air was full of anticipation and tension. Everyone wanted to know the truth about Midoriya Izuku, and wondered how it would affect the class going forward. After a simple breakfast of rice, onigiri and natto, everyone gathered in the common living area to hear what he had to say. Well, everyone except for Momo, who put several pots of tea on, knowing that they would be needed. But before they could actually start, even with the tea completed, they were interrupted by a knock at the door. Izuku had an idea as to who was there and went to open the door. Tashinori-sensei, Principal Nizu, welcome. Young Midoriya, I do hope we're not too late, Toshi said as he walked in, the principal on his shoulder. On the contrary, you're just in time, Izuku said with a smile. As soon as the two had taken seats, Izuku sat next to Shoto, the younger boy giving him a smile as he did so. Now, where do you want to start? Let's start with what your quirk actually is, Siro said. Because last I checked, power doesn't allow a person to fly. Jumping great distances, sure, but I've seen you floating in midair. Depends on the power, doesn't it? Toshi-sensei asked with a smile. I should probably answer this question, actually. Wait, why would you be better, sir? Hagakure asked. Because young Midoriya inherited my quirk, just as I inherited it from my master, a sacred duty like the Olympic torch. Our quirk is called One for All, and it was born of 2 quirks. The power to pass on power and a power accumulation quirk. One person improves the power, and it continues to grow as it's passed along. It is this cultivated power that allows us to save those in need of a hero, the truth behind our strength. The principal here knew about One for All and suggested that I come here to find a successor, but I found young Midoriya before I even started. His ability to fly is part of One for All, as that was my mentor's quirk. So, who could see into the future? Kaminari asked. No one, that's actually the side effect of someone using their quirk on me, Izuku stated. The only quirks I've gained from One for All are Float and Danger Sense, which is how I beat Puck back at camp. You lied to us, Sue interrupted. Izuku stared at her, confused. What about? Because I've only told a couple of lies, and I don't remember telling one to all of you. You told us you didn't have the same quirk as All Might back before the USJ. That was a lie. That only confused Izuku more. I never lied about that. I asked about your quirk, and you said that it wasn't the same as All Might's. That was a lie. Hey, that's right, Sato said. It was right after you insulted Endeavor and compared him to Bakugu. I said that I had the same quirk as Toshi-sensei, and unless you believed that he was All Might then we didn't have the same quirk. I misled you, but I didn't lie. I've tried to keep that to a bare minimum. I don't like lying at all. Most of the class accepted that answer, but Sue didn't look happy. So, getting back on topic, can you see into the future with your own quirk? Ashido asked. No, both of us were quirkless without One for All, Toshinori answered. That was actually part of my problem the first time around, Izuku stated. He went on to explain everything about his first life, including his bullying by Bakugu, earning One for All, smashing the zero-pointer and his record of breaking bones. You didn't have to go that far for me. I told you already, Shoto, you were worth every second of pain. However, when he mentioned the USJ attack, that raised a commotion. You knew it was going to happen? Several people cried out in shock. Why didn't you stop it? Koda asked. Because I was the only one of us hurt, and both Aizawa and All Might said that facing the villains that day helped us. It gave us a taste of what we'd be facing. If more of us had been hurt, then I would have tried something to warn Nizu or All Might or somebody, but because I was the only one hurt, then I didn't see a point in doing so. Oh, and before you ask, yes, I knew about the attack on the camp, but I talked to All Might about it, and I was the one responsible for Aizawa taking our phones, which delayed the attack, didn't it? Momo realized. You were expecting the attack on our third day, during the test of courage. That's why you had Ragdoll double-check the area. What about my brother? Did you know he was going to be attacked? Ida demanded. Yes, and I anonymously warned him about staying. It even helped some, because the first time your brother almost died and was confined to a wheelchair, Izuku countered, barely restraining his anger at his friend. A simple touch from Shoto helped calm him back down and he resumed his story, telling them how badly Aizawa had been injured at the USJ the first time, the sports festival, Stain, how the camp went down the first time and the provisional licensing exam. No one was surprised to learn that Bakugu had failed, but not even the most pessimistic among them had expected Shoto to be the other failure. After that, some of us joined hero agencies for work-study programs. That's where we essentially become sidekicks while still students. That was where I made my biggest mistake as a hero. Bigger than going to rescue Bakugu despite knowing it was illegal? Sue asked. That wasn't a mistake, Izuku stated. Saving someone is never something to be regretted. No, on my first patrol, a little girl ran into me. Even with as little experience as I had, I knew she was being abused. But I was ordered to give her back to her abuser by a sidekick. Izuku broke into tears before admitting, I had her in my arms and I let her go. I didn't just fail to save her, I actively chose not to save her, because it was against the rules. Because her abuser was the target of the boss investigation, I wasn't allowed to save her. I can never forgive myself for that. This time, All Might joined Shoto in giving the greenette the hug he so desperately needed. Once his tears had stopped, Kaminari asked, so, how does that fit into you, coming back, I guess? Izuku explained that, while occasionally sniffling. A few days later, my boss had a meeting with other agencies, including 2 that had some of us working there. There, he revealed that, thanks to Kirishima, they had learned her abuser was using her blood to create a drug that could destroy quirks. The next 2 weeks were spent trying to find her, and when we did, we launched an all-out assault against the Yakuza holding her. Eri, the little girl, as it turns out, doesn't have a quirk that erases quirks but rewinds the body to a pre-quirk state. Or at least that's how the Yakuza were using her blood. Her potential to rewind someone is almost limitless. So when I finally got to her during the raid, the only thing I can guess that happened is that she wanted me to no longer be hurt, and her quirk accidentally sent me back to before I learned I was quirkless. Time travel? Nizu asked, speaking up for the first time. I must admit, that was my preferred theory. I just hadn't imagined it was due to a quirk like that. Where is the girl now? Young Midoriya told me about her in a very general manner right after he was accepted into UA. That was actually what Tsukachi was talking about at the end of the USJ meeting. She's in a police safe house right now, being watched over day and night by some of Tsukachi's men, Toshinori explained. Any questions? Izuku asked, his story finished. Yeah, any regrets about changes you've made? Jairu started. Only one, and not because of what I changed, but because of the repercussions. I wish I had never thought to bring lunches to the beast's forest. When Kaminari asked why, he explained because Pixie Bob now has a crush on me. How many people outside of Mineta want to have someone twice their age crushing on them? Most of the class laughed at that, completely understanding Izuku's point of view. Do you actually have a spy in the league? Oyama asked. Depends on your definition of a spy, doesn't it? Izuku countered. He might have revealed more, but if the league or more likely all for one had a spy in UA, and Aoyama was his top pick. He still hadn't revealed where he'd been during the USJ incident, no one knew where he was when the media break-in happened, and it was only after A had their phones returned that the league knew where they were. Ida, however, was not satisfied. You used your knowledge of the future to change things without thinking about the potential consequences. One could even argue that you stole All Might's quirk dash. Stop right there, young Ida. All Might cried out, nearly yelling at his student. I have known young Midoriya was from the future since the sports festival, and I will not have you passing judgment on the young man I chose of my own free will to be my successor. Time and again he has proven himself to be a model young hero, and I could not be prouder of him. Only I have the right to demand he give up one for all, and I will never do that. I won't argue with you, sir, but the point is that Midoriya has been acting recklessly, too recklessly for a class representative. I suggest that we hold a new election to choose our representative. Ida, what do you think you're doing? Uraraka demanded. She may have been upset with Izuku for keeping such a big secret from them, but she liked having him as their rep. He was a good friend first, a leader second, and that was something that had earned everyone's respect as a result. Now Ida was betraying him. For what? Midoriya shocked her and everyone else with his response. I'm willing to step down if that's what the majority of you want. I've kept enough secrets that I can understand if you don't trust me any longer. I'll even leave the room while you vote. Everyone looked at Ida and realized that there was no way he was going to back down until he got his election, so they agreed. Wait, before you go, I have a question, Uraraka started. Izuku simply nodded, giving her the go-ahead to ask. Why didn't you tell us before? For the class in general, to make sure that all for one didn't find out before he was arrested. You and Ida though, you never once asked me a question about my quirk or how I knew so much about the future, so I never told you. Shoto and Kaken on the other hand did ask, so I told them after the sports festival. Wait, so that's how you knew to volunteer to be kidnapped? Kirishima asked. Yeah, Deku had made it pretty clear how important it was, and we guessed that my kidnapping the first time is why the heroes moved so quickly. If it helped All Might, I was up for anything. Hell, I had to talk the dumbass into it. But why did you tell them and not us? Uraraka asked. Again, you didn't ask any questions, they did, and they insisted on answers. Anything else? Izuku asked. When no others came up, he walked out the door with Toshinori and Nizu so they could talk in private. Momo opened the door 5 minutes later to find that Izuku and Nizu were deep in discussion about the nature of heroism and how to instill it in the students. We're ready for you. As soon as they were inside, Momo made the announcement. As I am the vice representative, I was chosen as the official vote counter. The results for the vote on whether or not to replace Midoriya Izuku as class representative are as follows. 2 in favor of replacement, 2 abstentions and 14 in support of Midoriya. The class cheered at the results, only to be interrupted by the sound of music. Whoa, it's all right. Everything will be all right. Whoa, it's all right. Everybody now we're here. What's that? Jair asked. I like it. It's an old song called Merry Go Round by Man with a Mission. Tashinori explained. They were a popular group back in the day. The conversation about Izuku's ringtone stopped just in time for them to hear Izuku's side of the call. Hi, detective, how are things? Could you say that again? Because I thought I heard you say that you lost her. What do you mean that's what you said? You promised me that you had officers you trusted watching her at all times. I understand that all for one in the league were a big deal, but couldn't you have left some you trusted with her? Couldn't you have borrowed a few locals to deal with the villains? Fine, but don't expect me to trust you with her again. This time she's staying with me. No, I don't know where she is, but I bet I know where she will be. Is there a problem, Midoriya? Nizu asked. The Shy Hasaikai have Eri again. They lost her because Tsukachi didn't have enough men to watch her and strike against all for one. Izuku rushed up to his room, Shoto close behind him, and grabbed a pen and paper. Dear Mirai-sensei, I would like to inform you that as of the underscore of September, I am officially resigning from my work-study program at the Night Eye Agency. While I am grateful for the opportunity you gave me, certain irreconcilable differences force me to write this letter. I hope the future bodes well for you. Sincerely yours, Midoriya Izuku. A resignation letter already? Are you certain you want to join them at all? Shoto asked. Night Eye is the only agency close enough to the Shy Hasaikai's base that I could run into Eri. It's there, or else I could lose her again. Shoto nodded, and the two boys spent the rest of the day together, enjoying this period of quiet before they had to deal with the future. A/N. Just to be clear, Aoyama was my main suspect even before the reveal, and honestly, it was just based on the USJ incident and his missing status. Well, that and his creepy outside-the-window act at the dorms. I didn't even put his flashback in the provisional license arc together until after the reveal. Second, some of you clearly weren't paying attention if you thought Eri could help Bakugo. I've been hinting towards Chisaki getting Eri back since the aftermath of Stain. Now, on the subject of Ida, Tsu, and Uraraka. Even in canon, Ida and Tsu are devoted to the rules, something that their internships only enforce. As such, they cannot support someone like Izuku who stands for saving people even if it means breaking the rules. Uraraka, on the other hand, doesn't want to lose either of her friends, so she refuses to choose sides. As for Bakugo and Eri, well, you now know how likely that is to happen. Oh, and don't imagine you know what's going to happen with the Shy Hasaikai. Trust me, you'll never see this coming. Chapter 16. Time for me to be defiant. The afternoon that Izuku revealed the truth, Monoma showed up to the dorms, intent on proving B was better than A in at least one way. So to be fair, Izuku called up Kendo and the two classes had a new round of the dorm competition. Monoma was not pleased when Shoto and Sato won the competition, Sato having made a cake just in time for B to pass through. That night, the third years held a welcoming party for their fellow students in the main hall, with Nizu's permission. They provided all of the food, thanks to Lunch Rush, and several methods of entertainment, including music, which Jairu quickly joined in on, and multiple party games. That last category proved troublesome for Class 1A. Among the games provided was a Family Feud-style hero trivia game, and everyone was shocked when they put up only Izuku when everyone else had 5 people on their teams. By Izuku's second round though, they knew why, as he swept the board every time. In the end, he had defeated every team out there, including one starring his third-year friend, Mirio Togata, who had confidently predicted his own victory and swept a few of his own boards. Izuku had won the game without giving even one wrong answer. He was promptly banned from all hero trivia games from that day forward. Izuku wasn't surprised. He'd been banned from the games among 1A even in his first life. The next day was their first day of classes since the training camp, and they were put to work developing super moves. As Izuku already had several, he went around to the others and talked to them about moves they had developed the first time around. As he did so, he noticed that one person was conspicuously absent, Bakugo. Any idea where Kaken is? He asked Kirishima during a break in their work on Unbreakable. Yeah, he's off at the support department. He said that he met a crazy girl with some good ideas to help him out. Crazy girl? Oh no, not her. Izuku rushed to the support department, but he was too late. What are you thinking with this? Are you trying to kill your clients? Came the very recognizable voice of Melissa Shield. If you put someone in this, the suit will try to break someone's back, and it might just do it. So I have some bugs to work out, so what? Hatsumi asked. It should be a point of professional pride that you don't have someone try out a piece of your equipment until it's free of bugs. Deku, why didn't you say you knew Gearhead? She's fantastic. I'm having her build me a new arm, Kaken explained. Wait, you like her? What am I saying? Of course you like her. She's crazy and obsessive, why wouldn't you like her? Izuku complained. I called Melissa here so you wouldn't have to deal with Hatsum. Melissa, who had overheard the discussion, decided to step in there. Oh, don't worry, Izuku, she shows a lot of promise. I'm sure with my guidance we can create something that will help Katsuki and won't try kill him the first time he uses it. Unfortunately, their conversation caught Hatsum's attention and she rushed to them. So, what kind of baby are you here for? She asked while groping him to get an idea of his body type. However, Izuku had trained himself to react one way to unwanted groping, and Hatsum learned that the hard way when she was kicked into the ceiling. No upgrades, no babies at all from you. Turning back to Melissa, he asked, why did you have to agree to work with her? That's the thing with support, we work for the client, not ourselves. Bakugo wants her working on his arm, so I'll work with her. But she did have a good question. Do you need anything? Nah, I'm good for now. I will definitely let you know if I do though, and I'd be willing to test your equipment. Class A's next rescue class showed that the cracks from Kamino had not been patched up. What happened out there? Toshi asked. That's got to be your worst rescue score since the sports festival. Usually you guys are all about teamwork, but this time it seemed like young Ida and young Azui were doing their own thing and the transport squad was directionless. Because we were, Ida stated. We cannot support Midoriya in his continued defiance of the rules, therefore we have quit the Overcomers. We can't just sit by while he does things we believe to be wrong, Ribbit. You could have said something, Izuku grumbled. If you had, I could have named a replacement leader for transport like I did with the Destruction Squad. Then he took a breath and thought for a moment. The two of them hadn't even sat with him at lunch or for study periods since he revealed the truth. Of course they wouldn't work with him in classes, so he apologized. Sorry, that was mean. I should have assumed that you quitting was permanent. Uraraka, do you think you can handle transport? Uraraka had continued to remain neutral in the fight, splitting her meals between the two groups of her friends. Sure thing. Melissa and Hatsum finished Bakugo's replacement arm 2 weeks before the date of the exam, leaving him with plenty of time to get used to it. In that time, Bakugo also announced that he had changed his hero name, and when he revealed it, everyone understood why. When they left for the exam, it looked like he had actually left his new arm behind, confusing everyone. Cats, do you really think leaving it behind is a good idea? Kaken gave him an evil grin before answering. What makes you think I'm leaving it behind? Everyone just let it go at that, as they knew better than to question him too much. He obviously had some kind of plan, they just needed to wait to see what it was. Kaminari went to lead them in the school motto, only for Yurashi Inasa to interrupt by saying it first. Hey, I've heard of you, Izuku said. You got first place in the recommendation test, didn't you? So I assume you know Shoto here? As he had expected, the Shiketsu student immediately turned ice cold, glaring at Shoto before storming off without another word. Want to explain what that was about, Midoriya? Aizawa asked. Confirming a suspicion of mine, Sensei, nothing more, he replied while giving a secret sign to the class. Everyone understood that it meant he'd provide more information in private. Ms. Joke showed up with her students, but Izuku was surprised when Shindo Yo walked up to him. Midoriya Izuku, right? Listen, I need to tell you something. Shindo, what are you doing? Nakagame Tarami asked. The right thing, Nakagame. If this is a test, then I'm passing it, and if it's real, then I'm going to prove myself a hero by doing the right thing. Listen, we were told that if we took you down in the combat portion of the exam, we'd pass. But I believe in you and your vision of the future. Izuku stared in shock for a second before responding. Thank you very much. Hey, how would you feel about joining us for the rescue part of the test? Everyone started clamoring about the offer, save for Shoto and Shindo. Are you serious? Shindo asked. When Izuku confirmed that he was, he gave a smile as big as All Might's in response. Of course I will. Great. Meet up with us after we finish the combat portion so we can talk about your roles. Once they had changed into their costumes, Class A turned to Izuku for the promised answers. Yurashi Inasa has a serious grudge against the Todoroki family because Endeavor doesn't meet his standards for heroes. According to Shoto in My First Life, he mentioned Endeavor to him in the recommendation exam, and Shoto acted quite coldly to him. Unless we can deal with that grudge before the rescue exam, it's going to cause problems. Then I'll have to try to talk to him before the exam, Shoto stated. What about the first stage? It's a combat test. We're given some balls and 3 targets to place somewhere visible on our bodies. If we take out 2 people, we pass, and only the first 100 people who do so pass. The best way for us to win is to split up immediately. That's why we've been practicing in squads recently, Izuku revealed. 15 minutes later, the exam room opened up, and Class A prepared for the battle. As soon as Yakumaru Mera announced the start of the exam, they broke up into their squads. Shoto had been paired with Izuku, Shiro, and Uraraka, as all of them had the ability to avoid his larger attacks by taking to the air. Momo worked with Azui, Shoji, and Jo. Bakugo was followed by Kaminari and Kirishima. The rest split into pairs and stayed in the same general area to provide support for each other. While the plan worked for a while, the attack from Seijin forced Izuku to split from the rest of the group, also allowing Kami to show up. Izuku was immediately on edge as danger sense went wild around her. It had never done that except around actual villains. With everyone else it just warned of imminent attacks. That, combined with what he had learned last time, put Izuku on edge, as he now honestly didn't know who this girl was, or even if it was a girl, as shape-shifting was always possible. Unfortunately, even with danger sense, she managed to get the better of him and she ended up in a very pervy position, and that resulted in Izuku launching her into the air. That's that, I am done with girls, Izuku decided. Every last one of them goes crazy when it comes to dating. Damn, that's going to cost me some money, Shiro stated as the trio reunited with him. And what is that supposed to mean? Izuku demanded. That basically everyone bet on who you'd start dating, Shoto explained, just as Kami crashed back to the ground. Who was that? Uraraka asked. Supposedly a Shiketsu student called Kami, but her quirk is different than what Shoto had reported, and danger sense went crazy around her. Could the 2 of you bind her so we could take her to be examined? The other 2 boys agreed, and they headed off to the anteroom, though not before Izuku removed her from the test, thus passing himself. On their way, Shoto slowed Izuku down so they could talk privately. You said you were done with girls, have you considered trying to date another boy? Izuku looked at Shoto in shock. The other boy was so traditional that he honestly didn't think the thought would have crossed his mind. I would at least give this hypothetical boy a chance. If I knew who it was, why? Could we try dating? Todoroki Shoto had made a habit of being incredibly blunt, so Izuku wasn't too surprised at the question. And giving it some thought, he certainly wasn't opposed to the idea. We can give it a try, he said with a smile. Shoto gave such a warm smile that Izuku's heart skipped a beat at the warmth in it, and he knew he'd made the right decision. The Baku Squad, as Pikachu had named their group, quickly discovered an enemy, and one who clearly didn't care about passing. He also clearly had an overinflated ego based on the way he was talking. And yes, Bakugo Katsuki knew that his ego was probably overinflated as well. He wasn't the type to lie about himself. When the other blonde said that the idiot made him feel dumb, Bakugo immediately got on him. He's saying that he's better than our school, Pikachu. And you are dumb, you dumbest. Why do you think Deku, Ponytail and I are always tutoring you? Turning to their opponent, he challenged the boy. Obligation, dignity? I hear a lot of talk, but I don't see anything backing it up. You're the worst of all, Bakugo. You're trying even though you've lost half your power. That just gives me more reason to fight. Bakugo countered. And with that, he activated his secret weapon. Gearhead and Techhead had created a brand new arm for him that worked as well as his gauntlet. They had even offered to make it look like his real arm, but Katsuki had refused. He refused to even attempt to hide the scars he had earned and the trials he had gone through to get to this point. Besides, he loved this new arm they had created, and it would be a crime to not show off their genius. They had made it so the arm responded to his thoughts, so he could fire off one of his huge blasts for howitzer impact when necessary, or as now, something as small and precise as a pea shot, and that was just the start of what it could do. Even with it though, he got caught by the guy, but Pikachu was able to save him and Ige thanks to his own new support equipment. The three of them were able to easily take him and his other victims down. When the quartet entered the anteroom, Mora Nagamasa immediately saw what was going on and reported it to one of the officials. While they waited for the others, Shoto went to talk to Inesa, but the other boy refused to talk. Once the test was finished, and all of 1A had passed again, they were immediately confronted by HPSC members. "Why did you bring a failed Shiketsu student inside?" Yukumaru asked. "I hope it's not because you think you can force me to let her take the second part." "No, I want Aizawa-sensei to come down and erase her quirk, because I believe a villain infiltrated the exams." "Please, a villain? The HPSC prides itself on security," Yukumaru claimed. "Excuse me, but why do you believe that she's a villain?" Mora demanded, intent on protecting his classmate. "What's her quirk?" "What? You heard me, what is her quirk?" Izuku insisted. Mora wasn't sure what to make of this most famous UA student, especially this strange demand, so he decided he needed to answer in order to get some answers. "It's called glamour. She breathes a mist that creates illusions." This girl shapeshifted into one of my best friends, and when she changed back to herself, the illusion fell off like mud. Even Yurashi paled at that, and when Aizawa showed up, the kami skin also fell like mud. Yukumaru screamed in shock at the revelation. "What? Toga Himiko of the League of Villains? How'd she get here?" The exam was paused long enough for them to take Toga into custody, with Mera escorting her out of the building. As they waited for the police though, he slipped her a small piece of metal that she easily hid inside her sleeve. She never arrived at the police station. While the HPSC was dealing with Toga, Izuku was going up to Inesa. The passionate wind user was excited to hear what the young celebrity had to say to him, until he opened his mouth. "I want you to deal with whatever problems you have with Todoroki Shoto, now." "And why should I?" Inesa growled out. His fellow Shiketsu students stared at him in shock. They had never heard him act so cold before. His passion was so powerful that it infected everyone who was around him for too long. But this cold, it wasn't like him at all. "You listen here, Yurashi Inesa," Izuku growled out. "I don't care what you have against the Todorokis, but if you mess things up for my friend in the rescue portion of the test, then you will answer to me. Now either deal with your issues, or I will deal with you." Inesa was honestly impressed with the green-haired boy. The words may have been cold, but the fire in his eyes was beyond question. It almost made him question things, but one look at Todoroki and he froze over again. "You were the one who beat me in the race in the exam, right? I apologize for my response, but I am not on good terms with my father, and outright hated him during the exam. You had compared me to him at a time I was trying to do everything I could to not be like him, and I took my frustration out on you. Would you be willing to at least call a truce for the exam?" Yurashi stared at the offered hand before slapping it away and storming off. "Yurashi, what's wrong? You're not usually so cold, so what happened?" Inesa looked up at the young man who had led them here, and told his story. Unfortunately, the words of the other students did nothing to quell the hate inside his heart. Yurashi just could not believe that the Todorokis could change, even with everything that he'd been through. Back with UA though, Shindo had joined them and was explaining his quirk. "I can create vibrations in anything I touch, but there's some serious backlash. Sometimes I can even temporarily paralyze myself." "Can you sense vibrations? Like say underground heartbeats or knocking?" Izuku asked. "How strong can they be before you're paralyzed? Also, do you have any medical training?" Shindo stared at the younger boy before turning to the other members of 1A. "Don't worry about it," Yaoyorozu stated. "Izuku's our quirk specialist, it's what makes him a tactical genius. Besides, it helps us know how you can best fit in." Shindo was a little relieved at that, but mostly confused about the fitting in part. "I can sense vibrations, but not as well as I'd like to, and it takes at least 3 tremoring earths before I'm paralyzed. And everyone gets basic first aid training in second year." "Good, then you're in our destruction, search, medic and combat teams, Izuku stated. You're what? Shindo asked in shock. What was this? I thought you knew about us? Momo asked. We're a team, and we decided the best way to handle rescues was to divide our resources efficiently. For example, I'm the head of the medic team. Our job is to care for the wounded in any way we can. I'm head of the search team, Shoji stated. Our job is to find the victims as quickly as possible. You're only our third member. Destruction's my team, Kaken stated. We clear an area for the medics, then remove and destroy any rubble possible to recover civilians. Combat is a secondary team, but if any villains show up while we're rescuing people, the combat team keeps them busy so the other teams can focus on rescue, Izuku stated. Other teams? Shindo asked. I run transport. We take the civilians from the disaster to the medic team, Uraraka explained. Reinforcements mine, Kirishima stated. We find the areas that hold everything together and make sure they stay standing or hold them up ourselves. Almost everyone has multiple roles so they can shift between what's needed at the time. Shindo stared at 1A in shock. No one had ever come up with a system like that before. Even the pros basically did as they saw fit during rescues, doing what they could with little to no organization. Wait, who's only got one job? That would be me, Momo stated. Since I can create anything we need, I stay with the medics, so I only use my quirk for supplies. Bandages, splints, simple medicines, things like that. More than half the class has some basic training in first aid, so if they're not needed, they can help with that. With that, they started going over their usual plans with Shindo and preparing for the rescue test. Shortly after their plans were finalized, the HPSC caught everyone's attention and destroyed the testing area while the HUC members were put in place. Valiant's first job was to fly up and pick a central location for Team M, and as soon as he landed there, Ground Zero and Pinky cleared the area of debris while Creati started setting up the area. As each pseudo-civilian was found, the first thing they heard was, "Don't worry, you're safe now because we are here." No matter whether they found one or a dozen people, the overcomers treated each of them individually, and with more care and respect than HUC had come to expect from hero students. As such, Saramichi, Nakazawa Takara and Furinji Hana, the three HUC members with the most experience, got together in private to discuss things. Eventually they came to a decision, and Nakazawa sent a message to the rest of the group. Make things as difficult as possible for the overcomers. Nagao Sora and Katayama Takao, two other experienced testers who hadn't been rescued at the time, were also stunned by how 1A handled things, as even when some of them attacked the heroes or refused to drop their defensive quirks due to trauma, the kids were still as kind and helpful as one could dream. Even more, every last one of them had a kind smile on their face. Not an all-might smile, but one that felt more genuine, as if they truly cared about each and every one of them. As such, they made an unprecedented decision. Mera, on the other hand, decided that it was time for things to get interesting and sent his own message. Instantly, there was an explosion near where the other schools had set up their own medic station, and Gang Orca as well as his army of sidekicks started attacking. Tailman, pull back and help the others evacuate the other station. Combat Squad, you're with me, let's take out these villains, Valiant ordered over their radios. Grand A Shindo was first on the scene, followed quickly by Shoto and then Gale Force A Yurashi. Grand and Shoto started well, but from Valiant's bird's eye view, he could tell that Gale Force was nothing but trouble. The minute he showed up, he immediately released the entire gang in an attempt at attacking Orca. Shoto launched another ice attack, but once again, the wind released the gang. The dual-haired boy considered using his stronger ice, but he knew that would only harm the professionals, so he decided against that. Listen, I'm going to use my fire now. Gang Orca can destroy my ice, he called out, knowing that the other boy could hear him. With that, Shoto unleashed his fire, only for Yurashi to immediately unleash his wind, utterly confusing the gang. Shoto tried announcing his attack again, but the boy once again ignored him and scattered his fire. Yurashi could not allow the son of Endeavor to pass, so he kept ignoring the other boy and sent his winds whenever he pleased, until he felt a tap at his shoulder. He turned, and was shocked to see Valiant of all people there in the air with him. I want. You either deal with your problems, or I would deal with you. So, you only have yourself to blame for this. With that, Valiant grabbed him by the cape and started spinning him around as fast as he could before launching the wind user at Gang Orca. The teen was so dizzy that he couldn't recover, while the number 10 hero wasn't expecting a person to be thrown at him, so he took the full force of the attack. In his booth, Mara was grinning like a loon. Here he'd been worried about Valiant's run, and the kid just granted the perfect opportunity to sabotage his test. Just to be safe though, he signaled Midoriya's scorer to give him an extra high demerit for the unheroic conduct. There was no way he was passing now. Down on the ground, Valiant was talking to Shoto. I knew he had a grudge, but I didn't think he'd go so far as to actually sabotage you. What's his problem? You're asking the wrong version of me, Izuku, Shoto answered. Then he noticed something and he warned his friend. Orca's getting back up, I'm going to pull my ultimate move. For the first time in this life, Izuku was just a little afraid of Shoto, as the other boy had developed only one ultimate move beyond his awakened abilities. Sure enough, the temperature in the area started dropping and one by one, the gang started to freeze to the ground once again. Gang Orca on the other hand just ignored the temperature and kept moving, seeing as how he was resistant to the cold. The hero even taunted Shoto, but the bicolored teen just kept dropping the temperature more. Finally, when the hero was a mere 20 feet away, Shoto called out Flash Freeze Heatwave and activated his fire as hot as he could. Orca's eyes went wide in shock, finally realizing what the boy was doing, far too late. The phreatic explosion was utterly devastating, yet when the smoke cleared, Gang Orca was still standing and moving forwards. What's wrong? Haven't you finished things off yet, idiots? Bakugo asked. Then he really took in the situation, walked up to Gang Orca and let off a small explosion, one that was honestly comparable to what he'd used on Izuku's notebook more than 18 months earlier. Even so, that tiny explosion was the straw that broke the camel's back, and Gang Orca collapsed. At the same times, the last member of HUC was rescued, ending the exam. Mare described how the scoring system worked and was about to announce the scores when Nakazawa Takara stood up. While it's rare for us to say anything at these tests, today is one of those days. Some of us have worked for HUC for decades, and we have seen many would-be heroes pass through here. However, while some work together, we have never seen such fantastic, effective, caring teamwork as we saw today from the Overcomers. As such, we are doing something unprecedented. We are giving each member of the Overcomers an extra 50 points towards their score. 1A cheered at that, while Mara gave a cry of pain and rage. How? How could his perfect plan have been ruined so completely? 75 points should have easily been enough to keep the brat from passing. In the aftermath of the licenses being passed out though, there was one thing that caught everyone's eyes. Dude, why'd you change your hero name? Kirishima asked. Because I want to honor All Might and I may have lost my arm, but I'm still an explosive user. From now on, I'm Dynamite, Bakugo explained. Izuku smiled at what he had overheard as he added Shindo's number to the Overcomers group chat, while telling him about their one rule, a message that's only coordinates was an SOS and should be responded to as quickly as possible. The older boy promised to do so if at all possible before heading off with Ms. Joke. Izuku liked the boy, but his warning combined with Mara's scream earlier made him worried. What did the HSPC have against him? When he'd looked at his personal test results, the man had taken 75 points away from him for unheroic behavior, yet it also only listed one infraction, throwing Yurashi at Gang Orca. That was as clear evidence of bias as possible, so why? Interestingly, that also resulted in him getting a mere 75 points on the test, the lowest score of anyone in UA. Then, right before UA was scheduled to leave, Mora showed up and apologized for Yurashi. I'm truly sorry, but it appears that Stain has had more of an influence than I had suspected. First Shishikura's test during the battle exam, now Yurashi. He believes that heroes need passion, and as such despises Endeavor with his whole heart and believes that young Todoroki is just as bad, despite only briefly speaking to him at the UA entrance exam. I shall endeavor to change his mind before he takes the retest. 1 week later, Aizawa called in the Big Three to get them to talk about the work studies program, and by the time Mirio tried introducing himself with a joke, Izuku just had to start laughing. You liked my joke? Mirio asked with a smile. No, It's just that the three of you are so awkward. I didn't think anyone could be more awkward with public speaking than Shoto or Koda are. Amajiki couldn't have possibly felt more awkward, so he wasn't affected, but Mirio and Nijire were shocked at Izuku's brazenness. Right? Well, you're kind of right about that, Mirio agreed. That's why I was supposed to do the talking, but I think I have a better idea. How about I show you how much work studies can help? I'm going to fight all of you on my own. The response was not at all what Togata Mirio expected. Instead of looking overconfident or terrified, the entire class looked excited, except for one group. The Baku squad all wore matching grins that were positively feral in nature. Mirio was actually getting a little nervous, not that he showed it though. Once they were in Gym Gamma, Amajiki tried to talk Mirio out of it, suggesting that he could break some of them. If you think any of us will break, you're dead wrong, Bakugo growled out. Are you guys ready? Hell yeah. Class A called back. Then, much to Mirio's shock, everyone scattered, spreading out enough that there was no way he'd be able to take out more than one person at a time. Midoriya, the pink girl and the electric blonde had all charged up in some way, and the entire class looked ready for a fight. Well, this should be interesting, he said with a smile. Right, first things first, he had to take out the long-distance fighters, starting with the sound girl. He lost his clothes, and fortunately fell into the ground at the same time. He was still working on doing that right the first time, then raised himself back up behind the girl, but she was prepared and fired a burst of sound at him without even looking at him. Okay, that was different. How about Bird Boy? Nope, the shadow had become a kind of armor, and he couldn't phase through it. Abyssal armor. Okay, how about Mr. Nice Try? Well, he managed to hit him, but the guy stood back up. A second hit took him down though. Laser Boy and Frog Girl went down, but when he tried to hit the pink girl that Nijire had been so fascinated with, his hand burned. Acid Man. Wait, did she coat herself in her own acid? So cool. Next was Ponytail, but she was able to quickly create some armor. Arms tanked 3 hits but fell after the 4th, and Electric Boy had covered himself in his electricity, meaning that Mirio got shocked for his attempt. How do you like my stun shield? Aizawa stared in shock. His students were good, he knew that, but this was something else. Up until now, he had considered Togata Mirio to be the person closest to earning the title of #1 hero, and here 4 of his students had kept him at bay. Ojiro only fell after taking 3 hits from Mirio, Uraraka almost touched him, but fell after 2 hits, with Ida taking the same. Koda and Hagakure fell after 1 hit and Sato took 3, leaving only Midoriya, Todoroki, Bakugo and Kirishima untested. Are you ready, Tintin? Bakugo demanded. Tintin? Mirio asked in shock. Oh, right, you're Explodo Boy with all the nicknames. You'll be fun. Mirio then dropped into the ground so he could appear directly below the delinquent, deactivating his quirk on his upraised arm. This kid could use getting knocked down a peg or two. But the second his arm was above the ground, Blondie was blasting it. Worse, Todoroki had sent a wave of fire and ice at him, keeping most of his body inside it, and the ice forced him to fly even higher. Once he was clear of the ice, Midoriya was waiting for him, just floating in midair. Since when could he do that? His shock was so great that Midoriya was able to kick him in the chest, sending him flying to the ground. Amajiki and Nijire stared in shock. Mirio had been untouchable in fights for a year now, ever since he'd started his work study. To think that a handful of first highs could defeat him was unthinkable. Wow, that was incredible. Just how did you get so good? Every last person pointed to Midoriya and started talking about how much he pushed them, even more so than their teachers. Well, imagine that, but more so in a work study. With that, Mirio went into how his quirk worked, how his own work study helped him master them, and the difference between that and the internships they had passed through.